Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Issei and Neo go out on a date and they find a baby Thanos girl and adopt her part 2. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the Nefarious doctor for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. Let's start this video. So the new group of students are coming in today. I'm wondering who's going to be on my team. Issei said as Neo signed back due to the two of them chatting for the past few months after the incident at the bar. Are you sure you're going to be okay? You are a lot stronger than you were a few months ago after training with the twins and me, as well as Junior and Emerald. Neo signed as Issei smiled at her concern before he replied to her. Of course, Neo. I'll be fine, I promise. After all, I was also trained by a mafia boss who's in charge of Vale. Issei said as Neo smiled and giggled at the fact before she waved farewell to him as they ended their chat. Over the past 2 months, Issei and Neo have chatted about almost everything. They too have even trained together, with Neo teasing Issei with her semblance wonderland, which allows her to create physical illusions that can be seen by everyone, as opposed to Emerald's hallucinations and illusions that she makes, which usually only affect the people she targets. Neo also had Issei learn about the underworld of Vale by having him come with her on some negotiations with rival gangs that tried to take her down, taking down minor criminals in the city, and even getting to know the Spider organization some more, and was given an official mark that showed he was part of the Spider group. Issei even learned how to do sign language so he could speak to Neo when he spoke to her to get to know her some more, and it was amazing learning about her since Neo was able to help Issei open himself up to the group. Melanie and Melcia liked to flirt and tease Issei, which led to Neo, who made an adorable pout when jealous, attacking the two to leave them alone. At the same time, Junior was amused by his boss and the newcomer getting along so well, and even enjoyed teasing the two by making some drinks with their names mixed as shippers did. Emerald was even worse since she enjoyed using her pole dancing to give Issei a special show for him and him alone, due to Emerald actually showing Neo that she liked Issei as well, since the mint-haired markswoman spent a lot of time with Issei as well and told him about her life on the streets before the spider took her in after she refused to join someone else who wanted to recruit her. In the end, Issei felt like he made some real friends here in this new world. Well, granted, they were part of a criminal group, but the memories he made with them were the best ones he ever had, apart from his time bonding with the teachers at Beacon. Port and Ubalik reminded Issei of his grandfather and father, since the two were very wise, but also helped Issei when he struggled in his lessons. Port even helped Issei train to be a better fighter, even though their fighting styles were different from each other. It still was a great time for Issei to learn more about Port and Grim. Ubalik was a great teacher who enjoyed teaching Issei about history from back before dust was even a thing and people could use magic, which amazed Issei since he hadn't been able to see anyone who could use magic at all, which is why when he asked the doctor about the past, Ubalik said he couldn't exactly explain it but was happy to share the history with a student who was very intrigued by it. Linda wouldn't admit it in front of the others, but she had grown a soft spot for Issei and enjoyed helping him train in combat as well, and even helping him with his second semblance. The two grew to see each other as a mother and son relationship, with Glinda helping Issei understand that it is okay to admire a woman, but the actions he did back home were unacceptable. Issei understood and wanted to prove he could change and become a better person, so he worked hard and focused on his training, even opening himself up to Glinda when she asked about Rainer. It was a tough job to help Issei recover from his trauma, but with a little help from both Neo and Glinda, as well as Sherm, Issei was finally letting go of his past fears and readied himself to help his future teammates. Issei's attire was now fully completed as he wore his dust cloak, as well as a basic red t-shirt with a white dragon head on the front. He then looked down at the bullhead coming towards the school. "Better get down and see my new classmates," Issei said as Sherm nodded before turning into a bracelet. Issei then fell backward off the top of the tower before letting his wings lift him back into the air. Issei always enjoyed flying since it felt liberating, and the feeling of the wind hitting his face made him feel as free as the wind. Glinda had told him thousands of times not to try to give her a heart attack, but Issei still enjoyed messing with his mother in the new world. The bullhead then landed as Issei made his way to the courtyard and smiled as he saw the hatch open up to let the new students enter Beacon. Still, a blonde-haired boy rushed out first as he barfed his lunch and breakfast in the trash can, causing Issei to wince at the poor guy before going over and helping him. "First time on a bullhead?" Issei asked as the blonde-haired boy hacked up some more but gave him a thumbs up. "You'll get used to it. Trust me on that," Issei said as the guy stopped before Issei offered him a bottle of water from his cloak and handed it to the barf boy. Barf boy thanked Issei for the drink as he used it to clean his mouth and help his stomach. "So what's your name, rookie?" "Name's Issei Haidu," Issei said as barf boy then sat on a nearby bench and responded to him. My name is John Ark. Thanks for the help earlier. My dad told me that being on a bullhead isn't good for those with a weak stomach, and I thought with some stomach medicine I could make it, but I forgot to take it before getting on board. John said as Issei chuckled at the guy before patting his back. Hey, it's no problem. Just be glad you didn't spray it on anyone because that's a bad way to make enemies. Issei said as John chuckled in reply before the two began to chat about their weapons. I use both a shield and sword, but I have another one on my back, John said as he pointed to the longsword that was in its sheath on his back. It's a family tradition that the next Ark who wishes to become a hunter must be able to pull the family sword out of the stone and wield it properly. Whoa. So you were able to do it? Issei asked before John shook his head. Not at first, no. That's because the sacred relic, Excalibur, is a special sword that only allows those who are worthy to wield it to pass the test. At first, the sword didn't allow me to wield it because it looked into my heart and soul, but I didn't want to be wielded by one who was the black sheep of the Ark family. John said as he rubbed the back of his head before explaining. My sisters were always more successful and better than me, the only guy in the family besides my dad, so I felt envious of them because it made me feel like my father liked them more than me. I thought if I could wield the sacred relic passed down in our family, then maybe I could finally get the respect I deserve, but it was in vain. John said as Issei patted his friend's back. I get it. You wanted to prove that you deserved to be an Ark, even though you weren't like your old man. I had two older siblings who died when they were born, so they never got a chance to live. When I learned about that, I wanted to live not just so my mother wouldn't be depressed, but so I could live for them as well. Guess in the end, that didn't work as planned. Issei said as he stayed under his cover story. John, on the other hand, smiled and nodded as he couldn't imagine losing one of his sisters before they got back to their talk when Issei asked how John was able to use the family sword. Well, that's because when I asked my father to train me to use the family sacred relic, he actually smiled at me and helped me train to become better, and one night, before I tried to wield the sword again. He told me that he was proud of me, but could tell I didn't have the same ambition as my grandfather or father, but after hearing that I wanted to get stronger, made him happy which hurt a bit, but one of the things I liked about my old man is that he was honest with me, John said he then touched the handle of the longsword before smiling at it. After that day, I went to the sword again, but I was more nervous than last time because I thought it would reject me again. However, when I touched the handle of the sword and began to pull it out, I saw a bright light coming out of it. I then heard the sword talk to me. It said that I was worthy of wielding it, but learning how to use its power would be another challenge for me, so I accepted it and began to train in using the legendary Excalibur. John said as Issei was amazed by the story before the two looked to see a blonde-haired girl riding on top of a horse walking past them. Ah, greetings, fellow hunters. I am Yang Xiaolong, and it's an honor to see more of my classmates. I hope we see each other again in the orientation. Yang said as Issei was amazed by how this girl looked like she was a princess, since she wore a white battle kimono with black and orange on its sleeves, as well as an orange scarf around her neck, while her hands seemed to wield some fans, as well as light but durable armor on her arms and legs. Wait. You wouldn't happen to be Yang Xiaolong, right? The infamous Ice Queen from that all-girls school and got into a fight with the Queen Bee there? Issei asked as Yang used a fan to cover her embarrassed face, but replied. You're correct. I am that same girl, but back then, I was always charging into fights without thinking straight, so I went through a bit of a phase until I was able to get some help in controlling my emotions and semblance, of course. Yang said as she fanned herself, helping her blush lessen until she bid them both farewell. Until the sound of clicking on the tile neared the bench, the girl who was approaching them first looked at the two boys and then looked at Yang on the horse. I thought you were going to send Bumblebee to the stable since the school allowed you to bring her with you. The girl said as Yang replied to her. I am, but I was just introducing myself to our future classmates, Yang said before introducing her to the boys. Allow me to introduce you to my little sister Ruby Rose. Ruby, meet Issei Haidu and John Ark. Issei and John looked at Ruby Rose and were amazed by how she looked like a mafia boss of sorts due to her wearing a uniform that gave them a look of her on top, but the corset allowed her to breathe easily. Her style was black and red like a Grim Reaper, but her hood seemed to be attached by a ring on her dot. The cloak portion extended to her armored boots that were made of strong materials, while her belt consisted of a sheath for a blade, along with a silver rose emblem at the belt. Her hair was black and short with crimson red tints at the end. It's a pleasure to meet you, Issei Haidu, Ruby said as she held out her hand, which Issei accepted before she pulled him off the bench and closed to her before whispering in his ear. Neo was right. You are a wonderful sight. Ruby said in his left ear, shocking Issei hearing Neo's name before the two girls left the guys alone. Do you know her, Issei? Can't say I have. Anyway, let's head to the assembly hall. It'll be nice to have a friend helping you get used to the area. Trust me when I say it is easy to get lost. Issei said as they headed to the auditorium. And this is why I told you not to eat too many of those pancakes, Ren said as Nora groaned as she barfed into the trash can due to the many pancakes she had, and maybe it wasn't such a good idea to pour a lot of maple syrup on them. Ugh. But those pancakes tasted so good. Nora groaned as she barfed even more into her trash can. Is your friend okay? A crimson-haired Amazon woman asked as Ren nodded in response. She's fine. This thing happens whenever she eats a large amount of sweets. Ren said as Purah nodded and handed him a bottle of some ginger ale. This'll help her stomach. Worked for me after long flights. Thank you. My name is Lyren. This is Nora Valkyrie. Ren said as Purah smiled back. My name is Purah Nikos. It's a pleasure to meet you both. Purah said as the trio began to talk. A tall, black-haired woman walked past them. How annoying. I don't understand why Sienna would want us to forge negotiations with these people. The woman said as her eyes caught a glimpse of a woman scaling up the walls and keeping out of sight from others. Perhaps this job won't be so boring after all. The woman said with a grin before feeling a force bump into her back. Excuse me, but could you move, please? The voice asked as the woman who was bumped into turned around to see feathery wings and a familiar symbol on the luggage. Oh, sorry about that. My name is Blake Belladonna. Might you be Weiss Schnee of Atlas? Blake asked as Weiss's wings flinched at her last name before Weiss revealed herself and nodded. Why yes. I apologize for what my father has done to your people, but I intend to change that when I become the president of the company. Weiss said as Blake smiled at this before patting the girl's head. Between you and me, I can tell you are truly worthy of taking the throne from your grandfather's company, more than that annoying older brother of yours, Blake said as she knew that Weiner and Whitley were the oldest of the Schnee siblings, while Weiss was the youngest of the trio. Winter Schnee had joined the Atlas military to escape the Schnee family and her father, Jacques Schnee. Whitley was basically his father. A snake in the grass that wouldn't mind even using his own family to get more power. Weiss Schnee, on the other hand, hated how her family's name was now defiled and dragged through the mud after her grandfather had built the Schnee Dust Company with the trust and respect of the Faunus, which is why Weiss wishes to claim the throne to rebuild the trust that Remnant had in the Schnee name. Then I look forward to seeing how you try to rebuild your legacy. Should you need help rebuilding the trust between the Faunus and the Schnee family, then the Black Fang shall be more than willing to help you. My father worked alongside your grandfather, and I've seen how you truly care for the Faunus, so it would be nice to help the Schnee regain their former reputation before Jacques dragged it down. Blake said as she handed Weiss a card before leaving her. Weiss looked at the black card and saw golden words on it. The Black Fang. Warriors of the night who wish to change the world without bloodshed. Weiss read aloud before looking at Blake's backside before heading to the auditorium. Little did these people know that the ones they met would be their friends and partners for many years to come. Within the Grimlands. It seems that God's servant has decided to make his chosen hero prepare for his friends to join his circle of pawns that surround Ozma on his high and mighty throne. A being said within the castle of the Grimlands was a being that had a score to settle with a wizard who was once his friend before being betrayed by him. The being was a tall satyr-like grim that had curled horns like that of a ram on his head. His feet were goat hooves, while his claws seemed to be normal. His eyes were red, while his smile revealed a row of sharp teeth and white fur around his neck. He then walked towards his fellow associate, who was mumbling words to himself until he greeted the human. Creating a new Grim for our inner circle, Watts. The satyr asked as the Grim, known as Watts, smiled and turned around to the satyr Grim before nodding. But of course. These Grim must be perfect to serve us and carry out your will, isn't that right, Groger? Watts said as the satyr known as Groger smirked at Watts and nodded. Indeed. The humans we have on our side, thanks to your efforts, may help us in these new kingdoms, but they are nowhere near powerful enough to face Ozma. The wizard may be weak due to his new body being old, but he still has his powers to fight back. Groger said as Watts nodded. And that is why I specifically recruited certain individuals who would be able to help us in our cause, but also to deal with any of the wizard's accomplices. Hazel is a prime example of Ozma's betrayal and using that anger for our benefit. Cinder is for the purpose of using her to obtain the power of the maidens, and the other two are for their psychotic mindsets and skills in killing. Tyrion and the infamous Marcus Black will be excellent in our work as we prepare for the first move to take the Fall Maiden and the sacred relics of knowledge. Watt said that he was fascinated by being able to combine magic and technology into his creations, which is why Groger sought him out to gain more knowledge of the kingdoms, but also sought out potential accomplices. I know, but even with their skills, they are still human, and only one of the group has a sacred relic, Groger grumbled as Watts chuckled in reply. And that is why I'm making a deadly beast to assist our associates on their mission, Watts said as he smiled and stepped back. Groger looked at a massive black orb of a liquid of some kind, as a hound-like beast came out of the orb and looked at Watts before bowing to him. Beat hound. A Grim that is designed to hunt down his target and never let them escape. He's intelligent, strategic, improvises when in battle, and can become intangible and change his body temperature. Watts explained as Groger smiled at the Hound before the doors opened to reveal the other members of their inner circle. Ah. It's about time you all showed up. I was starting to think I would have to let Hound claim your life to see what he is capable of. Groger said as Cinder, Marcus, and Hazel looked at the growling Hound with a bit of fear in their eyes, while Tyrion giggled at seeing the little dog before the Hound seemed to enjoy Tyrion's presence. Now then, let's begin by explaining your missions, Groger said as he looked at Watts to begin before the inventor nodded and began the meeting. Thanks to Cinder recruiting the White Fang, we will be able to begin Phase 1 of Operation Downfall. Cinder and Hazel will be responsible for assisting with the manual labor work in Mountain Glen to make sure we stay ahead of schedule before Phase 2. Watts explained as Cinder huffed, but nodded as Hazel nodded as he didn't mind working with the Faunus. As for Tyrion and Marcus, the two of you will be causing chaos and observing Beacon Academy. Ozma will try to bring some of his students into his inner circle, but when you are not observing Beacon Academy, I have another side mission for you. Watts said as he tapped a few buttons on his wrist before the screen showed the Emerald Forest. Groger has detected an ancient Grim sealed away in the Emerald Forest. It's located near the arena where the cliffs reside. Watts said as he handed a small vial of a strange liquid to Tyrion as he explained it. That vial contains the liquid of the Grim pools, and once you locate the ancient Grim, you'll use the liquid to breathe life back into the Grim. Even in its imprisonment, thanks to the troublesome silver-eyed warriors, they are still alive within their seal, so they need a bit of an edge to resurrect them. Watts said as the Scorpion Faunus giggled in excitement, while Marcus didn't care as long as he was getting paid. Once the operation at Mountain Glen is completed, then Phase 2 will begin. Are there any questions? Watts asked as he only saw a hand raised by Tyrion, causing the man to sigh. Yes, Tyrion. What is this ancient Grim we are awakening? A creation brought up by the witch Grim Salem. Tyrion asked as he loved hearing the stories of the legendary Grim that was sealed away by the wizard and the 4 sacred relics that kept her sealed away for all eternity. The Grim within the mountains is actually a Grim that Salem created when she was forming her council. The 7 Grim were highly intelligent and deadly servants who were created for the purpose of assisting her in her quest to bring back the brother gods with the sacred relics. Ozma was given to destroy the brothers and absorb their power to make her the goddess of Remnant. However, due to Ozma knowing he couldn't defeat Salem, he sealed her away with the 4 sacred relics and the 4 maidens, which is why we must acquire their powers to release Salem from her prison and then bring the brother gods to us so we can use their power against the world they left to be rebuilt in our image. Groger monologued with Tyrion, who was excited about the new world. At the same time, Cinder smiled at the idea of having more power at her disposal, while Marcus was intrigued by having a world of his own to kill however he pleased. Hazel, on the other hand, was then thinking of using the brother's power to bring back the sister he lost because of Ozma's cowardice. And the first Grim of the 7 were sealed as well when Salem was sealed, but before she was sealed away, Salem left a way for others to bring back her generals. The one in the Emerald Forest is the Grim known as Changeling or, as others called it, Envy. Groger said as he used his dark magic to create the image of a majestic shadow horse-like beast before it became many different Grim and humans. The Changeling was meant to be a Grim that could imitate its opponents and absorb their semblances, as well as take the form of their deepest fears. It was a creature that made others fear it for years, until it turned into stone due to the seal that Ozma placed on them. Groger said as the circle was amazed by such an ancient Grim and could see how it is a real threat that feeds off the fear of others. So, shall we begin? Groger said as the circle nodded before it began to plan for not only destroying Ozma, but also resurrecting the witch Grim. Emerald Forest. During that night, when all the students and teachers were asleep, the Grim seemed to be drawn to the mountain. Many Ursa, Beowulf, Nevermore, Deathstalker, and other small Grim headed to the mountain only to cross the bridge and make their way into the abandoned arena that was left there by the humans who resided there a long time ago. The Ursa Alpha that led the other Ursa Grim sniffed the air as it walked towards the wall of the mountain before it parted until a shadowy wisp emerged from the mountain as the wall began to become covered in more shadows. Come to me, give me your powers. The statue within the wall shined brightly as the Grim began to become consumed by the wispy shadows until the statue's eyes glowed emerald green before the statue continued to unleash power until the statue shattered, causing the remaining Grim to back away from the hole. A loud sigh was heard in the hole as the sound of bones cracking permeated the air until a laugh was heard inside the hole. A small Bordisk walked near the hole until a liquid tentacle wrapped itself around the Bordisk and dragged the Grim into the hole, where it was consumed by the creature that was once a statue. The Changeling then walked out as the Grim felt afraid of this creature. They looked to see that the Grim before them was a black horse-like beast with shadow wisps escaping its mane, while liquid darkness surrounded its body. The changeling had emerald green eyes as it smiled at the Grimm before it. Greetings, my fellow Grimm. I must say that it has been so long since I've seen many of my fellow kin stand before me when our mistress was with us, until that coward Ozma and his annoying group of hunters sealed her away. Still, now that I'm back, it's time to locate the sacred relics and release our mistress from her captivity. The foolish humans shall learn to fear the darkness and the Grimm. The changeling roared in the air as the Grimm cheered before the changeling looked at a human wearing a cloak as the ancient Grimm approached him. And just who are you, human? Why have you come before me? The changeling asked as the human removed the hood of their cloak and bowed to changeling, surprising it and the Grimm. That is because my people and I wish to bring magic back to our world and serve the witch, who was our queen and god before the wizards sealed her away from Remnant. The human said as the changeling was shocked by this before looking at the hood and seeing a familiar symbol. The Eye of Salem. Are you part of the cult of Grimm, correct? The humans who served Salem back in the days of Remnant when magic was in Remnant. Changeling asked as the human nodded their head. Of course. My fellow brothers, sisters, and I wish to release Salem from her prison so she can create a better world than the brother gods did when they abandoned and destroyed our lives. The human said as the changeling let a sinister smile appear on its dot. Then perhaps this will work in our favor. It will only be a matter of time until that wizard senses I'm free, but how was I freed from my imprisonment? Changeling asked as the human smiled and replied as she spoke to the Grimm. That is because of this. The human said as she took out a jewel orb that was dark purple, pulsing in the night with an eerie glow. The Chaos Jewel. It absorbs darkness and chaos in the air before the energy is converted for the Grimm to gain power. I was able to give this to the Grimm in the forest before sending some your way to begin your release from your prison. The changeling was amazed by this before smiling. Thank you, but I still feel weak due to my body being drained of its power. I need to feed once again on fear to regain my strength. And I have a perfect opportunity for you. The human said as she explained to the Grimm. Beacon has a special orientation tomorrow. Children who wish to be the great saviors of mankind shall be sent into the forest and unaware of the chaos that they will face when the ancient Grimm returns to feast on their fear and despair. The changeling Grimm smiled as she imagined it before looking at the human and asked. Intriguing proposition. May I have your name, little human? The human smiled as she took off the mask to reveal black eyes with crimson red eyes. Her smile became sinister as she spoke to the Grimm. My name is Alice. The true daughter of Salem, the witch Grimm. Alice said as she smiled a simple smile that showed joy at her bond with her mother. And once we free mother from her prison, then true chaos and darkness shall create a better world than this world. A world where I finally won't be alone. Darkness and light begin their journey as the next day will be when the forces of both sides clash for control of Remnant. I have to admit, this batch of new students seems to be a mixture of arrogance and incompetence, with only a handful of them being competent for tomorrow, Issei said as he ate some cooked broccoli in the cafeteria with Emerald standing near him. He was observing many of the future students either showing off their skills or telling how awesome they were back home in their training academies. You're not wrong. I can see the toxic masculinity and femininity. Most of them will probably be dead by tomorrow or drop out because Beacon and the other academies are nothing like their training schools. Emerald said as she counted some of the money she swiped from a rich bitch who didn't even notice a thief emptied her wallet. Well, at least there are some interesting people here in this group, that's for sure, Issei said as his left eye moved towards Yang and John, who were chatting with each other, while Emerald looked at Blake and Weiss before the duo noticed that someone was missing from the group. But before they could ask each other if they'd seen her, a red blur appeared between them, her silver eyes sparkling with amusement. Why, hello there. It's nice to see you both again, Emerald Sestero and Issei Haidu. Ruby said, much to the duo's shock as neither of them was able to sense her approach them until Ruby put a finger to her and whispered in Issei's ear. I'd like to speak to you after lights out. May I meet you in your room around 11 o'clock? Ruby asked as Issei then nodded before the cloaked reaper headed towards her sister and said something that must have embarrassed her since Yang began to lightly slap Ruby's arm with her fans. Which made the girl laugh while John looked embarrassed as well since he was tugging the collar of his bunny foodie pajamas. Damn. That girl really knows how to pull a 180. Issei said as he could tell that the girl he met earlier today and the one in front of him were two different women. One is a deadly force to be reckoned with and the other is a tease for a sister who still cares for her sister. Emerald chuckled as she patted his back. Trust me, you get used to her personality switches after knowing her a while. She's both two personalities in her, and trust me when I say I'd rather see that version of her over the Huntress version, since I still feel like I narrowly avoided death after she wiped the floor with me. Emerald shivered a bit as she recalled seeing those silver eyes trained on her, as if Emerald was the prey in front of a deadly silver-eyed wolf that was going to eat her alive. The shivering stopped when Issei placed a hand on her shoulder, which made Emerald sigh in relief as she thanked Issei for helping her. Unfortunately, the moment ended when a certain professor came into the room. Ahem, Glinda said as Issei and Emerald backed away from each other before. Glinda merely sent a small glare at Emerald before clapping her hands to get the students' attention. It's 10 o'clock, which means it's time for lights out. You can continue your chats tomorrow since you'll need your sleep, otherwise, you'll die before you even become a student. Glinda said in an ominous tone, which sent shivers down many students before Glinda turned to leave and took Issei out of the room with her. Emerald didn't quite want to leave Issei yet, especially if Ruby wanted to speak to him, so she followed him, activating her hallucination and making a fake in a corner where no one could disturb her double. After catching up to the mother-son duo, Emerald inwardly groaned as she didn't need a special hearing to hear Glinda talking to Issei as a doting mother. Did you already set out your clothes for tomorrow? Yes, Mom. I also made sure my weapons were fully loaded and ready, plus I even had Professor Port look them over. I also scoped out the entire group and have a small list of who I would like to have as my partner. Please tell me one of them is not a certain mint-haired dancer. Mom. You know how I feel about that girl. I'm just worried she's trying to seduce and corrupt you again. Mom. Emerald isn't like that. Sure, she can be a flirt and a tease, but she's really nice when you get to know her. You gave Neo a chance, so why not Emerald? Glinda was quiet before she sighed. Okay. If she does become a member of your team, then I suppose I can give her a chance. Thanks, Mom, Issei said as he hugged her, which made Glinda smile in happiness before she let him go back to his room. Glinda smiled as she watched him leave the hallway before lightly tapping her left shoe to the ground. I already know you there, Emerald. You can stop hiding now. Glinda said as she blinked momentarily to see Emerald appear in front of her, as if she had just been summoned into existence. How long? After seeing your reflection momentarily after you stubbed your toe against that chair earlier. Emerald and Glinda were silent towards each other as the professor spoke first. I don't know what your intentions are with Issei, but since he is willing to give you a chance, then I suppose I can do the same, Glinda said before her eyes sparked purple as she glared at Emerald, who seemed a bit afraid of the power in front of her until Glinda continued. However, know that if you try anything such as break his heart, then I'll gladly make you sleep with a Grim, and I don't care what organization you belong to, I will hunt you down. Is that clear? Glinda asked as. Emerald didn't speak, but nodded before Glinda left the hallway, leaving Emerald near Issei's dorm room. Emerald let out a breath of air she didn't even know she was holding before sighing in relief. I am so glad she's not an enemy. Otherwise, I would never be able to sleep comfortably knowing she's my enemy. Emerald said as she looked at her watch and saw that it was 10 minutes to 11 already. This shocked them, and she headed towards Issei's room, only to find him waiting outside for her. So I take it Mom interrogated you? More like threatened me, but yes. I love her, but sometimes she's way too protective of me. I can't blame her since the bitch who killed you is dead and manipulated you. If I ever met her, I would have choked her with my chains before gutting her like a pig. Emerald said as Issei blushed a bit. He then whistled at her. Damn. You make me want to kiss you even more now. Issei said as Emerald approached him with a sultry grin and then wrapped her arms around his neck. Why not tap first base in your room now that the helicopter mom is gone? Emerald Sistari, are you saying that you want to make out with me and go against my mother? How bold of you? Issei asked in disbelief. Emerald smirked at the question before using her piece of blackmail. Oh, and you don't want me to tell her about you and Neo going out for a few long lunch breaks? Emerald asked as she had followed Issei and Neo and knew that the two also had a few dates when Issei snuck out of the school at night to join her on her big nightly escapades. Fair point, Issei said as he picked up Emerald's bridal style and carried her into the room. He then placed Emerald on the bed, letting Issei drink in all of her beauty thanks to the moonlight. Emerald's chocolate skin glowed in the moonlight and her mint green hair seemed to make her even more exotic in his eye. Before her crimson eyes, he was mesmerized by a mom and then he spoke without thinking. I really want to eat you up, Issei said, which made Emerald blush at the comment before she spoke in a bashful tone. Then go ahead, Emerald said as Issei wrapped his arms around her head and pulled her up before they began to inch near each other. They're almost met. Damn. This is really turning me on right now. Ruby said as she cheekily smiled at the two from the window, causing Emerald and Issei to separate from each other. Ruby's smile became a mischievous grin as she then slid in between the two of them. So, were you two about to do the deed? Ruby asked as Issei and Emerald became red as roses before Issei shouted at her. No. Nothing happened. Why yeah, he's right. Even though I totally wanted to taste those of his ever since Neo spoke about their relationship and how she loved tonguing him to get a taste of him. Emerald said in her mind as she was pissed off that Neo took Issei's first kiss and mocked Emerald every chance she could by kissing right in front of her face, sending her a grin that dared her to try and take Issei's dot. Aha. Right. Ruby said before she then looked around the room and admired some of the decorations. Not bad for your room. What was so important that you wanted to speak to me, Ruby Rose, or should I call you the Bloody Reaper? Issei asked, having heard rumors from the Spider organization about the outside members of Vale, since Neo had chosen to bring them in when they earned her respect and attention. The Bloody Reaper was a legend itself on the part of well-known hunters and huntresses, since the rumors spoke of a terrifying huntress who was the Reaper that brought death to all of her targets, with silver eyes that struck fear into the hearts of even some of the strongest souls. This dual-sided scythe was known as Soul Eater and was wielded by a true master who also specialized in marksmanship as well. Also, the Bloody Reaper was a deadly force that came from the Branwen clan and was even the daughter of Raven Branwen. Issei had trouble with the rumors since he didn't believe most of them, since he thought most were hot air to inflate the huntress's ego. But seeing the 16-year-old girl before him with a spider tattoo on her left arm, where her shoulder was along with the emblem of the Branwen clan. So you've heard of me? I'm flattered to know that Neo's newest member has heard of my reputation. Ruby said as she sat at his desk chair before Issei snapped his fingers. A barrier was formed around the room, shocking Emerald but not Ruby as she smiled in amusement at this before asking him. Soundproof barrier? Yep. No one can hear us at all, and it won't allow anyone to enter the room unless I say so. It's a special trick I picked up when I touched a member that could create a powerful barrier that absorbed physical attacks but also sound, which led me to test out my version of it. Unlike the previous version, I can extend it to a room I am in and prevent others from listening in, even if bugs are planted in the area. However, this barrier also allows me to extend it to cover all of Beacon. The problem is that the larger of a barrier I make, the more aura it uses from me, which is why I don't use it very often. Issei explained as Ruby was impressed by the tricks that the boy may have up his sleeve, especially if what Neo told her about Issei was true, then they would get along better than she thought. Interesting. And I've heard of your sacred relic, but you aren't showing it to me. Why is that? Trade secret. If you want something, then you'll have to tell me if it's worth showing it to you. Fortress is just one of the tricks that copy soul that I'll show you for how. Issei said as he knew not to show his full hand from what Junior had told him when he was learning how to keep secrets and tell half-truths and lies to deceive others when he needed to, not that Issei wanted to lie to Glinda. Still, it was the only way to train more in the forest and Vale when Neo invited him out for the evening. Ruby smiled at this as she nodded approvingly in his direction before leaning back in her chair and continuing. That's good. It tells me you have a good head on your shoulders. Just make sure you know who your real friends are and you'll be fine. Trust me when I say that I've met people who pretended to be my friend just to leech off of me like some damn parasite. Ruby said as she narrowed her eyes as if recalling the times those leeches tried to act like they were friends when all they were was a waste of space and time. Emerald was still frightened, knowing Ruby's reputation, before Issei calmed her down by placing her head on his left shoulder, making Emerald feel safe as he wrapped a hand around her arm. Emerald always felt like she could never truly trust anyone due to her time in the streets and Spider, since people were always after something. Each member of Spider was loyal as a family, which made Emerald happy since she was part of that same family, but with Issei, she could tell that all he longed for was for someone to trust and open his heart to them. Neo was the first one since the two were similar in a way. As Emerald and Issei spent time together on missions, they became closer, as thick as thieves, and watched each other back. In fact, Issei even took a bullet for her one time when Issei invited her to a nice dinner with just the two of them, which was ruined thanks to the White Fang trying to get some quick cash from the locals. And to think I still fell in love with that same dummy, Emerald thought. She still felt guilty for Issei taking that bullet for her until he reassured her that he would have done so to protect her, since they were partners. And on that day, Emerald felt something towards Issei she had not felt in a long time. Warmth and love. Warmth when she was around him and how he made her feel special when they fought together and chatted about anything, and love when Emerald felt strange noticing things about Issei that even Neo didn't know about when they went on missions together, so when Issei took that bullet and reassured her with those words, she learned that she had fallen in love with him. The lovable dummy said that she would protect both his soul and heart from those who would try to use him, even if she had to make a deal with the brother god of darkness to protect him. So what's this about? Is it about a new crime boss or gang trying to usurp Neo of her territory? Issei asked as Ruby reached into her assets and pulled out a small device before seeing Issei turning his head away with Emerald glaring daggers at her. What the hell were you doing? Who keeps something like the information in there? Emerald yelled before Ruby tilted her head and replied with an innocent tone. My mom told me that if I needed to hide anything, then put it in a place no one would ever check, so she suggested my. Why are you so flustered? Is that not where you hide extra money or bullets when you're on a mission? Ruby asked. Issei could tell that Ruby may be a deadly force to others, but it seemed her mother was an odd influence on her social skills. I don't think even my mother or Neo does that, Issei said as Emerald then grabbed him by the shirt and shook him. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Why did you leave me out of it? Emerald yelled as Issei stuttered his reply. Well, I remember when why you had that dagger in your seed that one time, Issei said as he was then begging her to let him go before Emerald stopped as her face became atomic red as she recalled the time she did pull a knife out of her bust to take care of some bindings. Emerald was in one time when she got kidnapped one time back in her early thieving days. Issei shook his head before Ruby snapped her fingers to get their attention. I hate to break up your little argument, but we've got some business to discuss, Ruby said as she placed a small disc-like device on the floor in front of them. The device opened up to reveal a hologram of the Forever Forest. A couple of hours ago, a massive dark aura emerged from the cliffside of the Emerald Forest, where a massive dark aura was empowering the Grim. I headed there to investigate earlier and saw a symbol that I fear has returned. Ruby said as she then showed the symbol as an eye made of black blood, with a crimson iris at the center of it, and blood-red tears came out of the bottom. And the blood spelled a terrifying message to those who read it. The witch shall return. Darkness will cover the world and bring back what was lost to us. The warlock shall fall, and the rabbit shall feast on his blood for betraying his beloved. This is our message, so says the cult of Grim. The trio were shocked to see the message as Ruby closed the image before speaking to them. And that's why I'm terrified since I've heard of this cult. I only know a little bit about them, but what I do know from my mother is that the witch actually wanted to bring magic back to the world when the brother gods abandoned the world back in the old days. Still, these cultists are a bunch of psychos who won't even hesitate in killing in the name of the witch. Ruby said as she clenched her fists after hearing about them from her mother until Issei asked. But what about the ones known as Warlock and Rabbit? Issei asked as Ruby replied. I know the Rabbit, but she goes by Bloody Rabbit or Alice, since she's the craziest and the most loyal member of the cult. According to the reports about the group, she's the second in command, but her skills are nothing like I've seen, and this is coming from a silver-eyed warrior. Ruby said as she pulled out a photo and showed it to them. The girl herself had black eyes with crimson red eyes similar to that of a Grim, and her smile was sinister, despite her looking around Ruby's age. His silver hair was tied in a ponytail with a large ribbon on top of it all, allowing the trio a full view of her face. Alice was wearing a soft black evening dress with a big heavy skirt. Her upper body was dressed in a lace-embellished ribbon and a short tailored jacket. Her hands were donned with long lace gloves, not exposing any bit of skin outside, and a large umbrella was hanging over her shoulder. She looks like a goth version of Neo. Got to say she's got some style, I'll say that much. Issei said as Ruby pouted at the point since the Reaper felt like her style was taken from her before Ruby then moved to another image. She's deadly in combat with weapons and kind of seems to enjoy horror and making her opponents afraid of her. Her semblance is actually terrifying since she has the power to bend Grim to her will. Even a Titan Grim can become a pet of hers and they obey her every command, but her semblance is far more dangerous than one thinks. Ruby explained as she showed a video of Alice laughing with glee as she watched a pack of beelds kill a whole village. She pulled out a bow, but when she pulled the string back, the arrow became a deadly shadow arrow that struck a fleeing villager before they became a shadow Grim humanoid before the former villager attacked the others. Issei and Emerald were shocked by this before Ruby closed the image. That's impossible. One can't become a Grim, right? Issei asked as Ruby explained. The arrows she uses are made with a special liquid that corrupts its target and turns them into pawns. It's a fate worse than death because the converted humans are more grim than human, meaning the only way to free them is to kill them. Ruby said, as she had, with a look on her face before looking at them both. So you're telling me she's here in the forest? But why? Emerald asked as Ruby shrugged her shoulders. Your guess is as good as mine, but you need to be careful when going into the forest tomorrow. Whatever Alice was doing, there was not going to be anything good. I know her, and from what she told me when I clashed with her, is that she only cares about bringing back the witch, but I don't know who the witch and I haven't found anything to help me understand what this means for her ultimate goal. Ruby said as she sighed and leaned back into her chair some more until she looked at them both before asking Issei with a timid look. Can I stay here for the night? I wouldn't say I like being surrounded by many people. I trust you after what Neo told me about you being kind and gentle, Ruby said. Issei was surprised by this before something clicked in his mind. The face that Ruby had on her face matched his own when Raynor killed him back in his world. You loved Alice, didn't you? Issei asked as Ruby's face fell, much to Emerald's surprise. She had always seen Ruby as a strong woman, but seeing her face fall into a moment of despair made her remember that underneath the title Ruby had created for herself, Ruby was still a 16-year-old girl. Luna. I loved Alice when I knew her as Luna. And she betrayed you in the worst way, right? Nearly killed me after revealing herself as a member of that damn cult, Ruby said as her knuckles were white as paper before a warm hand was placed on her own. She then looked up to see Issei in front of her before he went in to hug the broken girl. Issei didn't need to say anything as Ruby slowly wrapped her arms around his neck and cried into his, her cries being muffled while her tears soaked his shirt. Issei could tell that the emotions that Ruby felt were the same ones that he felt the day Rainer betrayed him and hurt him in more ways than one. Ruby. You did nothing wrong. You deserve to be with someone who loves you for who you are and accepts you. Alice betrayed you, but you must not let her win. Allowing her to toy with your feelings and mind will only let her win over you again and again. She's the enemy and you don't owe her a damn thing. Issei said as Ruby looked at his eyes and asked. How? How did you get over it? And the answer shocked her. It still hurts to this day. Granted, Rainer no longer haunts me, but the scars are still on my soul. However, I refused to let her control me, so I had some help from people I trusted, and I was able to open up and heal. Time heals all wounds, but only if you allow it to. Let go of those memories, Ruby. Let go, and they'll no longer chain you down. Issei's words rang in her head as she recalled her mother, Summer Rose, speaking to her as well about her feelings towards Luna after learning who she really was. If you allow her to continue holding a piece of your heart, then she will continue to consume your life. So until you're ready to let her go, the ghost of Luna will continue to haunt you. Forgive yourself and love yourself so you can finally be free. Ruby sniffled a bit as she smiled at the memories of her mother, sister, father, uncle, and friends back in Patch. A sense of relief filled her heart, she truly felt free now. Thank you, Mama. Ruby whispered as she fell asleep in Issei's arms. Then, Issei moved her to his bed and asked Emerald to move as well. Emerald smiled at the sleeping girl and smirked at Issei with a teasing grin. So you were going after the girls of Spider, yes? Emerald. Don't ruin the moment with useless accusations. Issei said as he held Ruby's left hand, who squeezed his own, while Emerald snuck a photo of the two and sent it to Neo. This year is definitely going to be interesting, Emerald said. She then looked at Issei's back and smiled before vowing to herself that she would always stand by his side and watch his back. And thus, the night that was filled with fear and anger was now filled with warmth and comfort. Emerald Forest. So this orientation will fill the forest with the students you spoke to me about? Changeling asked as Alice smiled and nodded. Yep, and the fun part is that this chaos jewel will absorb their despair and fear once they learn that the forest will be filled with nothing but death once my pets eliminate them, Alice said as she patted the head of the Titan. She was sitting on top of while Changeling was amazed that a small human was able to control the lesser Grimm. Now, some may ask why Changeling isn't under her control. That's because she's an Elder Grimm with a stronger mentality. Salem ensured the mind tricks of others would not control any of her creations, using magic to allow her creatures' minds to develop an unbeatable will independently so that others beneath them would not manipulate them. Intriguing, and does this jewel also enhance the Grimm's powers? Changeling asked as Alice did a so-so motion. I'm afraid that the Grimm can only gain physical enhancements as well as regeneration, but the problem is that the more chaos energy I use from the jewel, the faster it'll run out of power. This is why I have to be careful how much power I release into my pets, and to take care of this, I made sure only to select my personal 5 favorite Grimm from my collection to wreak havoc. Alice said giddily as she imagined the dead people under her Grimm, while Changeling smiled as the Elder Grimm looked at the jewel. Fascinating. I look forward to seeing your pets tomorrow. For now, I need some sleep, for tomorrow, I hunt. Changeling hissed excitedly, then vanished into the darkness, while Alice let out a sigh of relief. Boy, I am glad that crazy Grimm is gone. I thought Changeling would try to kill me, Alice said, looking at her jewel and smiling. Maybe I can convince an elder to be my bodyguard if the elder takes too much pain for them to handle my semblance, Alice said, grimly imagining that if she succeeded, she'd have a powerful new pet to play with and kill her father. Orientation will be a memorable but horrifying day when the hero and his group are about to face their first encounter with the darkness. Are you sure you're feeling okay for the orientation, sister? You didn't come back to the room yesterday. Yang asked as she was worried that Ruby would have gotten kidnapped or hurt, but to see that Ruby was okay and happy with Issei made the ice user smile in relief. Ruby, on the other hand, mumbled as she loved her sister but was fine without Yang being around so much since she was a kid and Ruby wasn't some weak little girl. No, Ruby was a brawn, and as such, she wasn't a weak child like she was before when Yang awakened her eye semblance. I'm fine, Yang. I'm not some little kid. I'm 15 years old, graduated from Signal Academy, and mastered how to fight with one of the most dangerous in history. I don't need you looking out for me. I am fine. Ruby replied as she was sick and tired of her sister, thinking she had to keep an eye on Ruby while they were at Beacon. I can go toe-to-toe with Mom and Mama, but Yang thinks I'm still that little girl. Ruby growled in her mind as she ate her breakfast before Issei replied for her. Yang, Issei said as Yang looked at Issei before he continued. I understand you want to make sure your sister is okay, but she's not a child that needs her handheld. Sure, she'll need her sister sometimes, but don't you think you should have more faith in Ruby's training and abilities rather than think she's just a weak little girl? Yang looked embarrassed by the question as she used a fan to cover her flushed cheeks before sighing to herself. You make a point, Yang said as she closed her fan and looked at Ruby with an apologetic look. I'm sorry, Ruby, but it's my job as your sister to make sure you don't get killed. And I appreciate it, Yang, but I can take care of myself. Plus, don't you think you should be getting ready for the orientation exam as well? Ruby asked as Yang sighed but smiled, nodding her head before she paused, seeing John before smiling at him, to which the knight in training replied with a smile of his own. Aw, young love. Reminds me when we first met, right Emerald? Issei asked as he tried to get a kiss from Emerald, only to receive a chocolate kiss, which made Issei roll his eyes as he ate the kiss before Emerald grabbed him by his shirt and kissed his, much to his shock as Emerald then tongues him. At the same time, Ruby smirked as she took a photo of the kissing couple before sending it to Neo, who was enjoying an early breakfast. Ruby's smirk grew as she looked at Neo responding to her message. Ice cream lover. What the hell? Cookie goddess. It looks like Emerald finally took advantage of being in the school with Issei and away from you. Ice cream lover. Huh. Emerald knows that even though she's tonguing Issei, I took his first kiss and became his girlfriend first. Granted, I don't mind him having a couple of lovers, but only if they get my approval. Cookie goddess. So does this mean Emerald has earned her place? Ice cream lover. Piss off. Plus, I know Issei and Emerald like each other, but Issei respected my feelings, even though I told him I wouldn't mind if he had Emerald as a girlfriend as well. I love Issei and get what he went through, so I don't blame him for asking me about possibly dating Emerald when he began to develop feelings for her. Oh, I can't wait to rub in her face when Issei creamed me before the orientation. Cookie goddess. Whoa. I was surprised to see you two go that far. Ice cream lover. Oh, I'm still a vanilla woman, but let's say I gave Issei some sweet strawberry service, and as soon as I give him my chocolatey goodness, he won't get enough of me. Ruby's face became as red as her cloak as she knew what Neo meant by that. Before ending the message, both Issei and Emerald stopped kissing. Damn. How long have you held that in? Ever since you were healed from that bullet you took for me, Emerald said as Issei then hugged her and whispered something in her ear that made Emerald smile as she looked at Issei and smiled. I'd be more than happy to be your partner, Emerald said, as she had a plan and wasn't going to let anyone else be his partner. Glinda eyed them from the security cameras before growling to herself that Emerald was basically straddling and sitting on his lap. That woman better hope she becomes his partner or teammate, otherwise, I'll make sure that she doesn't corrupt him, Glinda growled as Osmond sighed as he looked at his disciplinarian in protective mother mode. Best I leave her to be before she releases her anger upon me. Osmond said in his head as he mentally prepared himself for Glinda, trying to sabotage the two from pairing up. Did you sleep well, Lady Weiss? Blake asked. Weiss blushed as she nodded before looking away to hide her embarrassment that she woke up on a lap pillow. At the same time, Blake was merely amused by Weiss's reaction due to the girl not being very sociable in her life, thanks to her family not being there for her, and Weiss being the black sheep of the Schnee family. I did. Thank you for comforting me last night. Weiss said as she tried to put on a brave face, but Blake saw through it as she hugged Weiss, whose wings revealed her true emotions, before patting her back gently. I'm glad you're well, Lady Weiss, Blake said before kissing Weiss's left cheek, causing Weiss's blush to reach atomic levels as she stumbled backward before she accidentally bumped into a wall. Hey. Watch where you're walking, Schnee. A tall girl shouted as Weiss backed away from the tall girl, who seemed to have shoulder-length light brown hair, indigo-colored eyes, and a pale complexion. She also wore a black collared shirt and black pants, each with red trimmings along the collar and sleeves, along with a red belt, a silver breastplate, and shoulder pads with gold-colored edges. Her emblem was a golden bird with outstretched wings resting on the front of the armor. DCH. I'm surprised your little daddy let the puppet attend an academy meant for fighting, and yet you're nothing but a pussy more than a fighter. The woman said until Blake stepped in with her arms crossed under her dot. Want to say that to my face, Henrietta Weiner? Blake growled as Henrietta rolled her eyes at the faunus before backing off. I'd rather say it to the little princess's face than someone who wants to play bodyguard with her and treat her like a pet, which is understandable, considering that Weiss Schnee is basically the weakest, Henrietta said as Weiss felt a stab in her heart as the Weiner girl continued. Most pathetic. Another shot to the heart. Inexperienced. Blake's left fist clenched as her ears showed she was getting annoyed by the woman until Weiner continued. Incompetent crybaby. Weiss felt tears threaten to leave her eyes as she looked down at the floor. And a wanted huntress who shouldn't even be here. Henrietta said as she flipped her hair in front of Blake's face and gritted her teeth. She then ran towards Carden and began to wrestle her on the ground. Take back what you said about her. Never, you pussy. Blake and Henrietta shouted at each other as a small crowd began to form around the two until a powerful force separated them. That is enough. Glinda shouted as Blake and Henrietta were definitely scared of the disciplinarian. Glinda walked towards the two and narrowed her eyes at them both. Both of you stop acting like children and prepare for the orientation. Save your anger for the forest to take your frustrations out. Glinda said as Henrietta stood up and flipped off Blake before stomping away as Blake dusted herself off. I was protecting Weiss after Henrietta insulted her. I'm well aware of Henrietta's history since this is the last academy that gave her a chance to become a huntress. Glinda said as Blake narrowed her eyes at her and asked. So why is she even here with that kind of attitude? Her father is on the council and requested we take her in as a student. It was Osmond's decision, not mine. And it's people like her who give the White Fang more power to recruit others to join them. And what do you want me to do? Expel her? Her father could easily ruin the school's reputation, close us down, and even pay for her to stay. Glinda said as Blake was annoyed by this. Weiss grabbed her hand and stopped her. Blake, please. Stop before you do something you regret. Weiss said as her eyes begged Blake not to do anything crazy or drastic before the samurai sighed. She let out a loud sigh, nodding to the heiress. Fine, but you're sticking with me, Blake said as she wrapped an arm around Weiss's waist before taking her someplace else's. At the same time, Glinda sighed as she knew that the Weiner heiress would be a problem since both the Schnees and the Weiners had bad blood between them, especially after Weiss tried to befriend Henrietta. Still, an accident that happened causes the two families to hate each other and destroys Weiss's potential to have a real friendship with Henrietta. Henrietta Weiner was a strong fighter who could become a great leader and huntress if not for the fact her arrogance and hatred for the Faunus didn't get in the way. The other three schools denied her to enter their school due to the girls' personalities and actions. Still, when Osmond told Glinda that Henrietta would be attending the academy, the disciplinarian was already planning something for the girls' team. That girl needs someone to give her an attitude adjustment, but also assist her in working out her issues, Glinda said as she went through many other candidates in the first-year group, but could tell Henrietta would either piss them off or make them afraid of her, until she saw only one person who could be perfect for the gig. I really don't want to, but he is the most qualified. He might be able to give her a good reality check since he's a lot stronger now, thanks to his training. Glinda said as she moved Henrietta to her group for the orientation. Team Issei Haidu, Emerald Sestari, and Henrietta Weiner. Team RWBY. Ruby Rose, Yang Xiaolong, Blake Belladonna, and Weiss Schnee. Team JNPR. John Ark, Nora Valkyrie, Pura Nikos, and Lyren. That's almost 3 teams, but who could work with Issei's group? Glinda pondered as she looked through many of the remaining candidates. Since Issei was a good leader, Emerald and Issei shared a good history. Hence, they're a good duo. Henrietta needed an attitude check and Issei could give her that, but also calm down her anger issues. I'll just have to wait and see, Glinda said as she sighed, hoping Sherm could assist Issei in the future with his new team roommates, before her eyes came across another one. This woman's profile and picture made Glinda smile as she looked at the woman's background and liked what she was seeing. Interesting. She'll definitely be able to assist Issei in keeping Emerald and Henrietta in check. Glinda said as she placed the final members' names on the team before submitting the report. Time for the orientation to begin, Glinda said as she headed to the cliffside, where she would be able to watch her son complete the orientation with his team. After all, even she's allowed to have some fun and not just Osmond. Later. So, does anyone know why we're meeting like this instead of the cliffside like it's been for the past years at Beacon? Ruby asked her sisters, Blake and Weiss, who were just as clueless as her, as to why the 4 of them were the only ones in the room. Did you all get told to go to the room with the given number? Weiss asked as she flipped out a paper that had the number 4 on it, along with Blake, Yang, and Ruby. Indeed. We all received the same number as well. Does this mean we are all on the same team? Yang asked as she was glad to be paired with Ruby, while Blake nodded in agreement with Yang. I do believe that is the case. I heard that Beacon Academy had to change the beginning from the landing procedures due to some issues with last year's freshman group. Blake said as her leader and boss, Sienna, told her about what to expect at the school. Why is that? I thought everyone was prepared a landing strategy for the orientation. Weiss asked as she was hoping to show off her skills with her wings, since she's been working on using her wings as weapons as well. I heard it was because of last year's incident where so many people died in the orientation that they didn't have enough people for a full team, Ruby said as she heard about the incident from last year, thanks to the Spider organization. Well, whatever happens, I am honored to be fighting with you all, so why don't we introduce ourselves and such to get formal with one another? Yang asked as she recalled a game that she and her roommates did whenever they received new members to their apartment for their time at the school. What do we say? Weiss asked, as she had never introduced herself to others before until Yang explained. It's simple, Miss Schnee. First, start with your name, likes and dislikes, dreams for the future, etc. Topics like that. I'll start. Yang said as she cleared her throat and began. My name is Yang Xiaolong, and I like dancing, riding Bumblebee my horse, spending time with my friends and family, and learning new dances for my fighting style, Yang said as she showed her war fans before she continued. Things I dislike are bullies, racists, and arrogant people who flaunt their status more than actually train. Oh, and especially motorcycles. I hate those dust guzzlers. What about your dreams for the future? Blake asked as Yang nodded and replied. As for my dream, I wish to make a name for myself as a huntress and show that fighting can combine both style and grace rather than barbaric acts such as swinging one's fists around like a drunken fool, Yang said as she imitated such acts which made the other girls laugh as Weiss went next with a bit of help from Blake. Well, my name is Weiss Schnee. I'm a Franus and I like to fly to feel the sensation of freedom like birds do. I also love my sister and butler Klein, as well as my mother, classical music, opera, and dancing. As for my dislikes, I would have to say, my father and brother, along with racists too. Why said as Blake asked her a question with a look of concern. But doesn't that include Henrietta? She was a bitch to you, so why don't you dislike her? Blake asked as Yang wanted to tell her to watch her language, but Ruby stopped her as Weiss explained. I know Henrietta, and while I admit that she can be arrogant at times if you start to get to know her, she's much nicer than you think. She even defended me and stayed in contact with me after the feud between our families happened. I always envied how strong and confident she was since Henrietta never let anyone talk bad about her, and she even stood up for me at the same school we attended, so I know that deep down in that tough facade is the same girl who cared for me back in school. Weiss said that Blake had a feeling that Henrietta might think otherwise, so she kept quiet about it before going next. Blake Belladonna. Likes are books, sharpening my sword, training to hone my skills, and drinking at some of the bars back home after an excellent mission. Blake said as she then continued. Dislikes are the White Fang and how they make the Franus look even worse than before, along with spoiler alerts. As for my dream, it's to better the relationship between Franus and humans so both sides can coexist just as they did when the Schnee Dust Company was first built. Ruby smiled in response as she admired that dream before going last. Ruby Rose, age 15, and what I like are any weapons and upgrading said weapons, gardening, working on my war cycle, training as well, and even speaking to my mom and mama. Oh, and cute boys and girls. Especially if I get to tease them and make them blush. Ruby said with a giggle as she continued. As for dislikes, I'd have to say non-sweet treats like sugar cookies and oatmeal raisins. Blech. Ruby said as she pretended to gag, trying one of them before continuing. And as for dreams, I'd like to become a huntress that's even greater than my mom and mama. A legendary huntress that is able to inspire others to rise and take up their arms to fight back. Ruby said as she had a sparkle in her eyes, which made Yang think back to when Ruby loved to read fairy tales about heroes and knights, and how she wanted to be like those heroes and knights who saved not only the kingdom, but gained the hand of a princess or lover. All in all, it was a wonderful bonding moment for them all. As for some of the others. Nora. I told you not to run off on your own like that. Ren said as he was trying to catch his breath while the hyperactive ginger-haired girl ran as if she was on a sugar high, as usual, while John was doing some light sparring with Purr before she disarmed him and knocked him off his feet and in the ground. Ow. John groaned as he slowly sat up before taking Purr's hand as the untouchable warrior smiled at him. Hey, don't be down. You're really good with wielding that broadsword, but you have to take into account the weight behind it and have your shield ready to defend yourself. The two-handed broadsword may have more power behind it, but its weight causes the user to have to use more power to attack and defend themselves, so I think a one-handed sword suits you better, since you're trying to go for a paladin style of fighting. Purr said as she helped John up before patting his back. Thanks. I'm getting better at using my sword and shield than how my dad taught me. How did he teach you? My dad threw me into a grim-infested area and had me fend for myself. Purr was shocked by this before replying. That's terrible. Not really, since when I managed to survive, he would tell me stories about Excalibur, and I was able to learn more about my grandfather and how to fight better. He always told me that training is one way to get better, but experience and near death help a warrior learn from their mistakes better. John said as he recalled the times he ran away from Beowulf's while Purr hugged John and patted his head. SHH. SHH. There. Purr said as John enjoyed the feeling of her assets pressing against his arm. He enjoyed the moment, along with the cheering of some voices in his head. Woohoo. That's our boy. Is this how a proud father feels watching their boy get a girl? I was so worried he'd end up alone. Me too. Hey, are you crying? And no. I just got dust in my eyes. Do you think there's wedding bells in their future? I don't know, but I always knew John had a thing for strong women. Explain why he liked that other girl Ruby. I cannot believe they're acting like I can't hear them. John said as the voices almost ruined the moment. Meanwhile, with the last team. Can you two stop fighting at a later time? We literally are stuck on the team until we survive orientation. Issei said as Henrietta and Emerald were wrestling on the ground after the brown-haired fighter called Emerald a whore, which really set off Emerald since she may have worked at a bar and enjoyed pole dancing, but that did not mean she spread her legs for anyone. Just let them get it out of their systems. Plus, it's a good way for them to earn respect for each other. Plus, this is better than TV makes it out to be. The fourth member, Roan Ashwood, a delinquent from Atlas, was expelled from Atlas for arson charges and setting the students on fire too many times. Roan was a dark-skinned girl with red hair and matching crimson eyes. She styled her hair evenly centered, parting her straightened crimson bangs, with large twin dreadlocked pigtails tied together at the back with gold-spangled ring headbands. She wore a white strapless leotard with a red triangle that exposed the majority of her arms, cleavage, and part of her hips, as they were underneath black shorts adorned with gold spikes at the sides. She also sported a black spiked collar with matching black spiked underarm pauldrons and long black gloves with large gold cylindrical cuffs. Her tank that held the ammunition for her wrist cannon is fastened horizontally by a belt, and studded leather straps on her waist are attached to a hardpoint to mount her tank on. Completing her ensemble is a pair of dark black trapezoidal sunglasses and dark rouge tick. She also had a tattoo on her upper left leg, as well as golden spikes on the sides of her pants and shoulder plates. Roan was an experimental pyromaniac since she loved to make bigger and better explosions with her Inferno semblance. Her dream was to not only retire with buckets of money, but also make an explosion so big it could become the ultimate weapon against any Grimm. Issei respected her desire for explosion since he desired to not only master his semblance copy soul, but also to become a hero that this world needed and protect the ones he loved since he refused ever to let down his loved ones again. Say it again. Say it. Emerald shouted as she held Henrietta in a chokehold before Henrietta elbowed the dancer in her stomach. As the two were about to continue until they both slammed into a wall that appeared out of thin air. Are you two done fighting like children, or can we actually get down to business like real hunters and huntresses? Issei asked as he was annoyed with their bickering until the two grumbled but agreed with Issei as the two sat at a table with Issei as he pulled out a map. Professor Goodwitch told me that they'll be placing the teams in 4 different areas in the forest. 4 relics in the forest range from pawn, bishop, knight, and rook. The 4 of us must each get 1 piece that's the same, however, we need to be wary of the Grimm, so given our skill sets, we should travel with Henrietta in the front due to her armor and power being the strongest out of all of us. Henrietta smirked as she flexed her muscles, causing Emerald to roll her eyes as Issei continued. I'll be in the middle with Emerald since we can watch each other's back, and lastly, Roan will watch our backside since she's best in the rearguard to cover us with her explosions and such, Issei said as Henrietta and Roan was surprised by how Issei acted before the former asked. How do you know how the orientation is going to be, and is this good for a freshman? Henrietta asked as Issei scratched the back of his head and replied sheepishly. Well, I was tutored by my stepmom Professor Goodwitch, my sensei Professor Port, and Ubalik when learning how to use my powers better, Issei said as Henrietta was impressed before asking. But I don't understand, if you are one of the staff's kids, then why not take advantage of that kind of status? Because I've seen what happens to people like that and they don't last long in the field. I would rather gain the loyalty of my team by not abusing Professor Goodwitch's status or even the teachers. Glinda Goodwitch took me in when I had nothing and taught me how to become a true leader. Issei said as Roan smirked in his direction before putting a hand out. Well, you got my respect. I admire how you handled that and dealt with her. Roan Ashwood is more than happy to assist the team boss man. Roan said as Issei was glad to have her on the team, while Henrietta nodded as she readied herself as well, until the screen in the room turned on with Osmond and Glinda speaking to them. Greetings, future students of Beacon Academy. I know that this is different from how Beacon has done orientation, but we had to change things after last year's incident. Your teammates have been given to your teams already, as well as the leader. Now know that the 4 members of the team must obtain the relic piece that you are tasked to find in the appointed area. I wish you all the best of luck and remember. You are all on the same team, and that means you are comrades, equals, and fellow brothers and sisters despite your status or race. Good luck to you all. Osmond said as Glinda smiled at the screen. As the doors begin to open, you all will receive the relic that the members must find in your area of the forest. There are 4 relics, and given the number your team has, that shall be the piece you locate. However, there are 2 exceptions. The Queen and King. If one team finds one of those 2 relics, then the whole team shall pass. Oh, and make sure you don't die. Beacon will not be held accountable if you pass away, but we will send you back in a hero's welcome. Good luck. Glinda said as Henrietta whooped as she saw the number appear on the screen. So we're getting a pawn because we're number 1? Screw the pawn. I'd say we find the king or queen and show the others that we're the best. Henrietta said as Issei stopped her. Hold on, we don't have any idea where the two are and they may not even be in our areas. I'd say we play it safe and look for the pawn pieces. Issei said as Roan agreed with him. I agree. As much as I want to go full inferno and torch the forest to the ground to look for one of the two, we don't know what kind of grim live in this forest, so we should play safe. Well, finding the king or queen may be a challenge that really tests our skills as a team, so why not go for it? Emerald said as the possibility of obtaining one of the two rare relics made her old thieving side want to go for it. The doors then opened as the four walked out and looked at the wide open space and saw that they were at the abandoned ruins of the Colosseum at the cliffside of the Emerald Forest. So we're at the Colosseum for our area, huh? Issei said as he pulled out the map and pointed to the area they were in. According to the map of the area, there's an old abandoned ruins that would make the perfect place to hide the relics, so I suggest we head there to try and find them. Agreed. Agreed, Emerald said. Let's do this. Roan said. Just as long as you let me smash some heads in, Henrietta said as the four headed out to the ruins, unaware of the dangers in said forest. It looks like we have to head to these ruins to find the night piece. Unfortunately, it'll be a bit of a long walk through the Emerald Forest. Ruby said as Blake looked at the map with her and pointed to a shorter path. If we take the path that heads towards the lake, then we'll be able to get there faster. Plus, we can rest our legs there after walking or if we're running from an enemy and need room. Blake suggested as Ruby liked how insightful the samurai was before nodding in agreement. Then that is what we'll do. Weiss, can you scout ahead with your wings to make sure there's nothing there while we head to the lake area? Ruby asked as Weiss smiled and nodded. Just leave it to me. Weiss said as she flapped her wings and flew into the sky. Yang also called out to her. Be careful and watch the ground. Yang shouted as she was worried for the heiress that she might get hurt by enemies before the trio began to head towards their destination. Alright, looks like we're heading to some altar where we have to find the rook pieces. It makes sense since we're in the densest area of the forest, but we should be careful since some Grim could take advantage of the terrain to surprise us, so we should have Ren scout ahead of us while we head to the altar to alert us of any danger that we may come across. John said as he was glad to have been thrown into the forest by his old man as part of his training. I can handle that. I'm used to scouting by using the trees to help me. Ren said as Nora whined that she wasn't going with Ren before John spoke to her. Nora, we'll need you here with Purra so Ren and I can check ahead for enemies. You two are the strongest members of the team, but being too loud attracts the Grim, so we got to be careful and quiet. John said as Purra understood what he was saying since her armor did make a bit of noise that attracted enemies due to her shield on her back. Alright, then, John. Lead the way. Purra said as John began to lead the way while Ren went ahead of the trio, but not too far. Changeling's eyes glowed brightly in her cave as she smiled at the children entering the forest. Excellent, and now the carnage can begin as I will now slaughter them, but who to go after first? I want some rich and delicious blood to be from my first victim after my imprisonment. Changeling said as she looked at the groups before seeing the bracelet on Issei Haidu. It can't be. The White Grim are still here, but they were wiped out ages ago by Lady Salem due to them rebelling against her. How is one still alive? Changeling growled as she walked towards the outside of her base and looked at her two generals that she enhanced with Alice's orb. The first general was a massive lizard-like Grim with 4 legs that were beefy and strong, covered in thick armored scales, as well as a long tail that seemed to have both a club at the end and a 3-clawed tip at the end. The second general was a half-humanoid and half-snake as its long snake-like body at the bottom was long and black with thin scales that were hard to see, along with a deadly blade at the end of its tail. The top half was humanoid, as the human half had long, wicked claws that dripped venom with each touch, along with snake-like hair. Its mouth was wide open as the teeth dripped venom. Gorgon. You shall intercept the northern forest. Changeling ordered as Gorgon hissed in appreciation as it slithered underground before Changeling turned to the lizard Grim. As for you, head to the eastern part of the forest and feast there. Plus, the lake will be able to assist you when dealing with your prey. The lizard nodded as the creature left the Changeling before the ancient Grim turned to Alice, who was sitting on the back of an Ursa. Would you care to join the killing? Oh no, I'm good. I have to head out soon, so enjoy the carnage for me. Alice said as she snapped her fingers and summoned a portal of sorts behind her. Alice and Ursa left the Changeling as she laughed. She then became one with the shadows and headed towards the direction of the White Grim. I need to get rid of that White Grim, otherwise, the humans will learn of their power and use it against us. Changeling said as she knew that the White Grim were truly a threat that had to be eliminated. The humans helped with that since they believed all Grim were evil, and Salem's forces believed that they were all eliminated, but now one remained. The changeling growled as she stopped to see a human boy and a girl making out in the forest, which made changeling smile as she then turned into shadows and slinked towards the two of them before she took the two of them down so quickly they didn't even notice her or scream. It's no fun when the prey doesn't scream or yell as they usually do, but I won't turn down some food, changeling said as she opened her mouth. Two orbs of light left the duo as the changeling ate them and smacked her before her body glowed green with power as she let out a sigh of relief. Ah. There's nothing more delectable than the souls of children so I can regain my power. Changeling said as she then used her horn to levitate the blood off the ground and order it to enter her mouth, causing her to enjoy the blood to wash down her meal. The boy could have used some more vegetables, while the girl needed to smoke less. Honestly, if we were around humans, they probably would have killed themselves because they were stupid. Changeling smiled as she then entered the shadows again and headed toward her target, while also beginning to enjoy the feast that was in front of her. Are you sure we're going the right way? Ruby asked as Weiss nodded in response while leading them to the lake. Yes. I scouted ahead, and there were no Grimm at the lake. We should be able to take a breather there before moving on. Weiss explained before flying up into the air again and scouring the lake one last time to ensure there were no Grimm near the area. Weiss's eyes narrowed as she used her special vision to see clearer through the water and trees. One of the many things Weiss learned about her Frontis traits was that she had hawk vision, which allowed her to see extremely far and see through water unless it was very murky. All clear. Weiss called out as Ruby and the others came out of the bushes and relaxed next to the lake. Weiss stretched her wings to relieve some of her tense muscles, since carrying her weapons and ammo weighed heavily on her wings, so she had a special bag to help carry her weapon and ammo without them weighing down on her wings that went around her waist, as if she was a delivery girl. Ruby sighed, resting in the grass, smiling as she felt the warmth of the sun on her body, heard the cool breeze of the wind, and heard the birds chirping in the trees. Yang, on the other hand, was enjoying herself. She enjoyed these moments of rest since she knew how stressful the academy experience could be once the orientation was over. Lake, on the other hand, didn't mind it since she wasn't at the academy to be a student but to scout out the White Fang that resided in Vale. Despite the White Fang trying to usurp the Spider organization, which led to their failure time and time again, Blake didn't mind it. Blake took out the map and calculated the distance from the ruins before speaking to the group. I do believe we should be able to make it to the ruins where the pieces are if we walk the rest of the way due to dense trees around the area, Blake said as she pointed to their destination and explained the trees that covered the ruins. Weiss agreed with her since she didn't want to have to deal with the trees messing with her fighting style. I agree with Miss Belladonna, Weiss said, making Ruby snort at the name before she opened her left eye and looked at Weiss. Aw, geez. Get a room already, or if you want, you two can have fun in the bushes over there, Ruby said, causing Weiss to blush heavily as she tried to hide her red apple face. Blake was surprised that Ruby would make such an accusation. Ruby, please refrain from tormenting Weiss. She's not used to teasing, even if it is light-hearted, Blake said, glaring lightly at Ruby before the silver-eyed girl rolled her open eyes. Fine. It was just a joke. Don't take it so seriously, Ruby said, while Yang sighed at her sister, knowing her little sister's personality. Ruby Rose had two sides to her. The first half of the warrior side, who loves weapons, makes strategy, loves to come up with new weapons and upgrades, and even clashes with other people at their training school. But the other half was more of a naughty girl who loved to tease and mess with others with either jokes, harmless pranks, or even showing her dorky side when she went crazy over a game that intrigued her or weapons that caught her interest. Now, Ruby, I do believe we must continue if we wish to make it to the cliffside and complete orientation, Yang said. Ruby sighed as she did a flip and stood on her feet before pausing. Her eyes narrowed and she put a finger to her mouth to tell them to be quiet. Yang readied her blades due to her knowing that Ruby was feeling something amiss in the area, which made sense since Yang could tell that the Grimm were avoiding the lake specifically for some reason until a massive roar occurred in the lake, causing them all to wonder what was in the lake until a fireball was shot out of the lake right towards them. Take cover. Ruby yelled, causing the four of them to separate as the fireball hit their location. A crater appeared before the water began to split, revealing a massive lizard-like Grimm with 4 beefy and strong legs covered in thick armored scales. The tail seemed to have both a club at the end and a 3-clawed tip at the end. The crimson eyes glared at 4 girls before letting out a roar as it lifted its body with its hind legs before slamming the front legs down. Massive boulders formed in front of its face and the Grimm turned to the side and began hitting the boulders using its tail as a baseball bat. Scatter. Don't get hit by those boulders. Ruby shouted, dodging the first one before Yang tried to fire the eye spear at the Grimm, but the thick armor prevented its skin from being penetrated. The armor is too thick. We need to break it down somehow. Yang shouted to her sister while Blake was firing bullets from her gamble shroud. The bullets did nothing but annoy the lizard, which then roared at Blake again before shooting a fireball from its throat, forcing Blake to retreat. Weiss soared in the air before noticing that the lake was not deep enough for her to see the Grimm's massive body. She also noticed that steam seemed to be rising from its body. This Grimm is a lot smarter than the ones here. It is massive and slow but bulky and tough to hit. The lizard seems to rely on sight and smell alone, while its weapons are its fireball and clubbed tail. The fireball takes time to recharge, while the tail is its weapon for close combat fighters. There's got to be a weakness to this thing, but what? Weiss analyzed her mind as she recalled the words Winter told her when she was still in training. Every Grimm has a weakness. The objective is to look for a new angle. Those words resonated in her head as Weiss sent a few of her feathers to fly down towards the Grimm and attack its underbelly. The Grimm grumbled in annoyance as it seemed a bit itchy underneath its armor, making Weiss's eyes widen at its weakness. Of course. We were so focused on the top part of its body that I didn't realize that its underbelly was its weakness, Weiss said in her mind before flying down towards Ruby and whispering something in her ear. This caused Ruby's eyes to widen, as did her grin before she nodded. Oh, this is perfect. I've wanted to test my new weapon, Ruby said, agreeing to Weiss's plan before Ruby yelled at Yang, who was panting heavily due to her dodging multiple boulders. Yang. Focus on freezing the water and don't let him move from the water. Ruby called out as Yang nodded before using her fans and billowing a massive tornado that began to turn icy blue due to the ice crystals within them before the lizard began to get ill due to the temperature drop. At the same time, the water began to freeze around it. The wind eventually picked up the lizard and flipped it over, but the lizard was too cold even to move as the ice froze the top half of its body in the water. Blake then yelled as she used her sword to slice off the flailing tail, but the Grimm didn't flinch because its body was too cold even to register that its tail was missing. Weiss was flapping her wings as hard as she could while carrying Ruby in her arms. I'm sorry, Ruby, but I do think you should either lose a few weapons or pounds. You're a bit heavy. Oof. Weiss shouted, struggling to fly even higher until Ruby reassured her. Don't worry, Weiss. One shot is all I need from my baby, and we'll be good. Ruby said as she twirled her scythe before it transformed into a massive bazooka. Now. Ruby shouted, pulling the trigger as the middle soared into the air until it went through the top of the tornado and headed to the center of the lake, where the Grimm only saw a massive grin on the missile before its life ended. Boom. Oh yeah. That was awesome. Hahaha. Ruby cackled, while Weiss was a bit nervous at the massive explosion before Yang approached them with Blake supporting her. That was a good plan, Ruby. It wasn't just me. It was a team effort, and little Miss Shy Girl here was the one who figured out the Grimm's weakness. If it weren't for her, then we would have been dead. Good work, Princess. Ruby said, making Weiss pout at Ruby. Really? Princess. My name is Weiss. Sorry, Princess, but your expressions are too enjoyable for me, so I'll still call you Princess, Ruby said before Blake's smirk appeared on Belladonna's face. As entertaining as this is, we should get moving, Blake said, and Yang nodded in agreement. I agree with Miss Belladonna, but might I suggest we take a breather? I'm quite sure my arms and legs are tired, Yang said, struggling to stand, before Ruby nodded in her direction. Yeah. Let's take a break for now. Ruby said, causing Yang to thank her before collapsing on the ground with her face in the dirt. I don't care. My face is in the dirt, I am too tired to care, Yang mumbled with her mouth in the grass as Blake sat next to her, while Weiss smiled at the faunus before letting her wings take a breather. Ruby, on the other hand, smiled at her team as she was glad she still decided to come to Beacon Academy. It was definitely a lot of fun for the silver-eyed warrior. Gremlins. How interesting. So this is one of the only remaining silver-eyed warriors, Alice. I'm surprised you didn't kill her the last time you saw her, Groger asked, while Alice smiled in amusement while looking at Ruby through a seer. Oh, I did try, and I was this close to slicing out her pretty eyes, but that bitchy mother Raven stopped me before I could, and when her other mom joined the fight, I got my ass handed to me, forcing me to retreat, Alice said, pouting as if her favorite toy had been taken away from her before she watched the battle of the Lizard Grimm be destroyed. And it's such a shame that my Earth Dragon was beaten even though it was newly born. I wonder how Gorgon and Changeling will deal with the enemies they're facing. Alice pondered while Groger continued to watch the seers, since they were capable eyes and ears for him to gather information on Ozma's forces, since he knew everything about Ozma. His weaknesses, his strengths, his associates, and much more since they were brothers in arms during the War of Grimm before learning the truth of Ozma's real identity. The Schnee girl is a lot smarter than she appears, while the others are capable in their unique way. Groger said before Alice slapped his left arm, pointing to the screen. Oh. Gorgon is coming up. Let's see what's happening with him. Alice cheered while eating some popcorn, making Groger chuckle at the child before watching the show. Of Team JNPR. Watch your left, Ren. John shouted before dodging a large swipe of Gorgon's claws as the Grim howled into the air, trying to rip a new hole into John and Ren, while its tail held Nora in her place. Now, normally, Nora would be able to bust through the Gorgon's coils, but the Gorgon struck her with its claws, and Nora began to feel weak, as if her aura had deactivated. Help me," Nora muttered as she felt the air leaving her body, while Ren shouted as he shot the Gorgon's snake hair, making it hiss and roar as the bullets hurt its children. "Purr, now," John yelled before Purr's shield slammed Gorgon in the face. The top half of the Gorgon was sent away, releasing Nora from the tail, which gave Ren the chance to get Nora away from the Grim. "I'll tend to her. You guys take down that bastard," Ren said before he used his semblance to hide himself and Nora to administer an antidote. John summoned Excalibur and banged the sword on his shield. "Hey, ugly. Over here," John called out, causing Gorgon to glare at him with rage and annoyance. "Yeah, that's right. Come and get me," John yelled as Gorgon then charged at John, with Purr running next to him. "Where are we going? We need from to fight, and the trees aren't helping, but there's an open field near us. Once we are there, we make our stand," John said before seeing the massive field a few feet away with the Gorgon Grim right on their tails, hissing at them as it barreled through the trees or sliced them with its claws. John and Purr dashed towards the open field, with the Gorgon Grim hot on their heels. John could feel his heart pounding and his adrenaline coursing through his veins as he prepared himself for the battle ahead. Purr, always compassed and ready, stood by his side, her spear at the ready. "You ready, Purr?" "Indeed. I have your back." The birds flew in the air all around them, petrified of the Grim destroying the trees, while the sound of the Gorgon's hissing radiated in the air. John's palms were sweating while Purr was nervous about the Gorgon, especially with how handy it was in the forest, but out in the open field, the two humans had the advantage. Her eyes scanned the area for anything they could use to their advantage to one-up the Gorgon, but the only notable objects were the boulders in the area. Come on, John said, worried that the Gorgon would give up on them, until a powerful scream hit him in the and sent him flying into the boulders Purr had seen earlier. "John. Behind you," John shouted as the Gorgon Grim appeared behind Purr. Its massive form cast a menacing shadow over them. Purr braced herself, ready to meet the attack head-on. But just as the Grim was about to strike, John leaped into action instead as he brought Excalibur down upon the Grim's thick scales, each strike reverberating through his arm. Purr followed suit, her rifle fired a rain of bullets through the air as she delivered blow after blow to the creature's exposed flesh, which made the Gorgon hiss at them before it used its massive claws to push John away before charging at Purr. The Gorgon knew that if it took out Purr, then the other humans would be easier to kill, and that arrogance is what will lead to its destruction. The Gorgon was relentless in its assault, its claws slashing through the air with deadly accuracy, forcing Purr to defend with her shield before the tail slammed into Purr so hard she flew into the trees, causing John to call out to her. "Purr!" John shouted before he ducked and weaved the Gorgon's claws, narrowly avoiding the onslaught from the Gorgon. John then began his attack by using one of the 7 powers of Excalibur. "This is risky," but John said before vanishing from sight. Gorgon was shocked to see the human vanish, just like the green one, before sniffing the air. He couldn't smell the human scent before glaring around him, hoping to find the human, but John thought ahead as he used rapidly along with transparency to hide among the boulders and dust to cover his scent. "Okay, the Gorgon hasn't detected me yet, but I can't hide forever. I need to take this bastard down soon, but how? Those scales are tough as rock, and if I get too close, the tailor claws will get me as I get tired," John said, recalling how he studied Grim when his father trained him with Excalibur, until John noticed something odd about Gorgon. It was the fact that its, specifically where the lungs were, had little to no armor, which made John recall the Gorgon releasing that howl attack earlier, which made John realize that he found a vulnerable spot amidst the Grim's armor. With a shout, he charged at the Gorgon in plain sight, making the Gorgon charge at him with persistence in its eyes, before the Gorgon's claws sliced the sword in half, causing John's eyes to widen before the claws sliced off the armor and stabbed John in the heart. The Gorgon cheered in joy as it felt satisfaction for killing the human, but something felt odd as the Gorgon tried to pull its claws out, only for them to be stuck in the human's body. "It's not easy taking your claws out of stone, is it?" John asked as his body dissipated like mist before John revealed himself to be right underneath the Gorgon's claws, with its sword stabbing the Gorgons, shocking the Gorgon as it felt its life fade away. The Gorgon let out a final anguished roar, trying to free itself before collapsing to the ground, defeated. Breathless and victorious, John fell to the ground as Purr came to his side and smiled down at him. "Good work, leader." John smirked at this since, despite the intensity of the battle, they shared a moment of camaraderie, a mutual understanding passing between them. "Aw. It's so cute it almost makes me want to throw up," Alice said as she kicked her feet in the air while Groger continued to eye the sword. So the boy really is a child of his grandfather and has access to Excalibur's powers. Interesting. He might be a real threat if he unlocks its true form. Groger said in interest as he recalled the power the sword wielded before Alice eyed before asking him. What's so powerful about Excalibur? It's just a fancy sword, right? Alice asked, making Groger laugh in amusement of the girl before he began to speak the story of the sword. Excalibur is more than just a blade. It's a blade that contains the souls and powers of the previous users. The blade has the power to make one invisible to the naked eye, grant superhuman speeds that would be impossible, illusions that would fool even the greatest wizard of them all, bless others with extraordinary power to command entire armies. Destroy over 1,000 enemies with a single swing of the blade, and finally being able to change its form into anything the wielder desires. Groger monologued while Alice was eating some more popcorn, amazed by the sword legends before Groger continued. However, the spirits of the past only allow those worthy and who share the bloodline of the Ark family to wield the strength of Excalibur. It seems that the boy can now use some of the sword's power, but we must be wary of the boy since he is more dangerous than the silver-eyed warrior. Wait. You mean to tell me that scrawny knight is more dangerous than Ruby Rose is? Alice asked in disbelief, while Groger nodded his mind before returning to the seer to see Changeling appear at the ruins where Issei Haidu and his group were entering. Now, this will be an interesting battle. The Grim Elder of Envy. Changeling versus the Pawn of Ozma and his group. How amusing. Groger said, mentally preparing to witness an interesting battle. According to the map, we should be getting closer to our location. Anything we should avoid, Emerald? Issei called out while Emerald was leaping across the trees before looking through some binoculars. No, but I see the ruins up ahead. And there's definitely something shiny in there, Emerald said in excitement before she ran towards the ruin with Henrietta behind her. Issei groaned at having two people excitedly charging into the unknown, and Roan was enjoying the chaos that came with the orientation. This is definitely going to be fun. I'm so glad you are enjoying this. Issei groaned while Roan smirked in response. Thank you. I was being sarcastic. No. You are supposed to use a sarcastic tone. Now I'm going to look foolish. Can we please hold this off until we get the relic? Issei asked before the duo entered the ruins, hoping that their teammates wouldn't get killed. While this was happening, the danger was looming nearby. Changeling smiled, looking at the group entering the ruins in hopes of searching for some artifact. This worked out perfectly for her, since her prey would now be in a closed-off area, giving her the advantage, since she could become even the smallest creature to hunt and stake out her prey. Perfect. Now that they're looking for some artifacts, I can take them out one by one and have a wonderful feast. Changeling smiled as she became a small fly and entered the ruin where her prey was now before becoming a lizard and scaling up the rock wall while keeping an eye on them. The loud one was arguing with the green-haired woman while they were fighting over whoever found a king chess piece, while the brown-haired one, who seemed to be the most level-headed, was trying to break them up. The crazy one, well, she was just being crazy since she appeared to be testing something on the rocks. Changeling's eyes then went towards the bracelet on the level-headed one's left arm, making her smile grow as she recognized the white grim within it. There you are. Changeling said, hurrying towards the boy while sticking to the shadows until she was close enough to reach out a claw that was about to touch the bracelet. Almost. Changeling shouted in her mind until the gauntlet manifested and slapped Changeling away so far that it shocked the girls and Issei as Changeling reverted to her true self and glared at them. Issei then summoned a spear made of fire dust and threw it at Changeling, which forced her to dodge the weapon before she charged up her horn and fired a beam of magic at the four. Scatter. Issei shouted, making Henrietta and Emerald run with a relic on Emerald's person before Issei picked up Roan and used a chain to pull them away from the beam. Roan. How many bombs do you have? Enough to blow up Beacon. Wait, why do you ask? Roan asked before Issei whispered something into her ear, which made her grin even more while she rubbed her hands together. Please marry me so I can make so many explosions, Roan said in a serious tone while Issei rolled his eyes. Later. Can you do it? Roan didn't say anything as she pulled out her bombs before speaking to him. Give me 5 minutes. You got a deal, Pyro-chan, Issei said before dropping Roan in a hidden part of the ruined cave. Then he went back to Emerald and Henrietta, who was struggling to hit Changeling due to her shape-shifting abilities and playing keep away with her beam attack from her horn. Emerald dodged another blast from Changeling's horn, frustration evident on her face. We need to come up with a plan, fast. Henrietta nodded, her eyes darting around for any possible advantage. Issei, any ideas? Issei glanced around the ruins, his mind racing. Roan setting up explosives. We need to hold out until she's ready. But how do we deal with her shape-shifting? Henrietta asked, frustration creeping into her voice while the trio were behind the rocks within the ruins to protect themselves. Issei's eyes narrowed as he watched Changeling darting between forms, her movements fluid and unpredictable, while he fired at her with different kinds of Dust's far-reaching weaponry. We need to force her into a form where she's vulnerable. Not exactly easy with her slipping between large and small, Emerald said as she tried to fire at Changeling, but the envious Grim laughed at them while flying around with amusement in her eyes. Aw. What's wrong, humans? Can't hit a moving target? Changeling asked, making Henrietta bite her tongue as she pulled out a fire crystal and was about to throw it until Issei stopped her. What are you, crazy? You'll blow us up. Well, we can't just waste ammo like this. We need action. Changeling laughed at their futile attempts until she hissed due to a stream of fire hitting her back before Roan flew out of wherever she was and dropkicked Changeling, causing the Grim to yell as she collapsed on the ground. Let's go. Roan shouted as Issei nodded before grabbing both Henrietta and Emerald while running to the exit. Changeling groaned as she slowly stood back up. Changeling then heard some beeping as she looked around and saw multiple bombs above the ruins, which made her eyes widen to dinner plates before she tried to flee the ruins. However, just as she neared the exit, a wall of fire cut off her escape route. Her eyes looked to see Roan's trap she had laid out for Changeling, causing her to yell in rage as the team got out of the ruins. Now. Issei shouted with Roan smiling as she tapped a button that caused the ruins to become a mushroom cloud, with Changeling yelling from within as the flames engulfed her being until the team looked back to see the flames and the falling ruins, making Issei sigh in relief. Okay. Looks like we took care of that, but do we still have that relic? Issei asked, making Emerald grin as she pulled out from her bust the king piece before tossing it to Issei, who caught it and nodded in her direction until the group then heard some panting from the flames as Changeling emerged from the flames with barely any energy while the flames licked her skin. How dare you? Changeling yelled as she ran towards Issei, her eyes bloodshot with rage until she hit an invisible wall, knocking her out before Issei stopped Henrietta from finishing off the unconscious Grim Titan. It would be a shame if we left a potential threat to roam freely, but we don't know why she's here or what she is, which is why I have a better idea, Issei said before tapping on his bracelet to summon Sherm, who was hissing at Changeling, but surprising both Henrietta and Roan until the small dragon leaped onto Changeling's head. A pure white aura left the dragon as Changeling groaned while feeling cleansed of her rage, disgust, and fear towards humans, until Changeling's body was now changed, thanks to the White Grim. The White Grim were beings who were able to let go of their rage and negative emotions, which made them slaves to the witch and her followers. This is why the White Grim had the power to cleanse the souls of the Grim, change them to be free, and reveal their true selves. Whoa. Is this the same Grim as before? She looks more like royalty than a Grim. Henrietta said, shocked by what she witnessed, while Emerald was amazed by the Changeling's new appearance. Changeling retained her slender, insectoid form, but with notable changes reflecting her newfound harmony. Her once dark chitin now gleamed with a soft pearlescent sheen, reflecting the colors of the rainbow. The sharp edges of her horn and wings have softened, now adorned with delicate patterns reminiscent of butterfly wings. Her mane and tail, once jagged and spiky, now flow gracefully like strands of silk, shimmering with iridescent hues. Changeling eyes, once cold and calculating, now hold a gentle warmth, mirroring her transformation from a sinister ruler to a compassionate leader. Changeling then looked at Sherm before bowing her head in respect to the white dragon. Thank you, the great dragon, for freeing me of my life as a servant in darkness, Changeling said before looking up at Issei and his team and apologizing to them as well. My apologies for my behavior towards you all. I was hungry after being sealed away for hundreds of years. I ask for your forgiveness. Changeling said as she bowed her head to them until Henrietta replied for them. We forgive you, plus I think this suits you better than the black skin you had before the whole rainbow style, Henrietta said, making Changeling giggle. The group turned to see Osmond approaching them with Glinda, who seemed worried but held her desire to rush towards Issei and check on him, along with a bullhead behind them. Congratulations on finding the king relic, but I'm afraid we must take Changeling in for questioning, since she is still a Grim, Osmond said, causing the group to react with shock. Hold on. She didn't harm us, so why must she be punished? Henrietta asked in disbelief. She's a tough woman and helped us work as a team. Queenie has respect in my book. Roan said before Issei spoke to Osmond. I'm sure she did kill some of the others, but you said it yourself that not everyone would survive, and now that her negative emotions no longer influence her, are you still going to question her now that she's free of them? Issei said before Emerald was about to voice her own opinion, but Changeling stopped them as she walked toward Osmond. Do not worry about me, young ones. This is the cost of what I've done as my other self. I'll gladly accept punishment for my actions. Changeling said, much to the group's shock, before Changeling spoke to them. For what it's worth, you four will become a great team. Granted, it was a bit tough for a while in ruins, but you all have the potential to become great defenders. All that I ask is that you find my brothers and sisters and purify them from their wounds as well. Changeling said before Glinda led the team away to Beacon Academy in the Bullhead, while Osmond led Changeling to a closed-off area of the forest. Sherm whined about this turn of events because he thought he'd no longer be alone, but Issei held Sherm from flying towards Osmond because the boy had a feeling about what Osmond was going to do with Changeling. "Hey, Issei," Henrietta asked, causing Issei to look at her and see her sad eyes before she continued. "Do you think Changeling could have been our friend?" Issei looked at the others, who seemed to have the same question before Issei replied to them. "I believe Chrysalis would have been happy to actually have friends who could have helped her have a better life," Issei said while looking back at the forest where they not only gained a friend, but Issei had a feeling they wouldn't be seeing Chrysalis again anytime soon. Within the Grimlands. DCH. Classic Ozma. "I believe that the Grim can never truly change despite the White Grim having such power," Groger said, while Alice booed Ozma as he killed Chrysalis with his cane. "I still don't understand the White Grim. Why were they such a threat to the world when the only White Grim were the dragons?" Alice asked before Groger turned to her after sending the seer away. "That's because the humans and Faunus feared the idea of the Grim actually being able to coexist with them, especially since the brother god of light created the White Grim dragons," Groger said as he tapped a bell on his neck. Then, an image appeared before the duo. "Many years ago, when I was still human, I had heard of a civilization where the Grim were white as snow and didn't harm the people who lived near them, but instead protected them from the Grim. Leading the White Grim were the White Dragons, whose power was able to purify and destroy the darkness. They cared deeply for the Grim and wished to protect them from darkness, so the White Dragons purged their darkness. Salem was, in fact, going to purge the darkness from within herself, in hopes of being free from her curse, after hearing how the White Dragons could cleanse and purify the souls of others, however. Ozma and his group of followers feared the White Dragons, thinking they were going to destroy the humans once they assimilated an army. Broger explained that his bell showed the dragons protecting humans, as well as the White Grim, before the humans and Faunus rebelled against them. "And sadly, I was among the humans who fought against Ozma, who was a brother in all but blood. I tried to convince Ozma that the White Dragons were protecting humans and not trying to harm them. Still, Ozma didn't listen and said that Grim were beings of darkness and could never be seen as a force for good or peace, so he and his army attacked the village and killed anyone who stood in their way." Groger said that as the image changed to Ozma, his group attacked the humans, Faunus, and White Grim in the villages. Many of the White Grim tried to save the humans and Faunus, but the Silver Eyes hunted them down and killed them, making Groger growl before it changed to how the dragons were killed one by one, until only 2 dragons remained with their children. The last of the White Dragons knew that they had to protect their children, especially after Salem, who defended the White Dragons, was sealed away. The dragons decided to hide their children in a location where no humans or Faunus would dare tread, in hopes of protecting their children from the dangers of Ozma and his army. Alice was shocked to see this before the image ended there with Groger walking away from Alice until she caught up to him and asked. Wait a minute. So you mean to tell me that Mom was looking for a way to remove her curse?" "Yes. Salem believed that if she could remove her curse, she would be able to live her life one last time before peacefully passing away with her children at her side," Groger said, recalling the woman's goals if she were free of her curse and all of her children were still alive. Alice then smiled at the idea of her and her sisters being alive as they learned magic from their mother and played with Grim, Faunus, and humans. She grew up to see her sisters and mother get married again, only for her mother to grow old and pass on to the afterlife with her children and grandchildren around her bed as her life left her body. Alice cried as she missed her mother and sisters. They were her real family, and Groger was more of a father than her birth father was, since Ozma always looked at them with fear in his eyes. "Groger," Alice said, looking down at Groger's eyes. "Even if we do save Mother, how will we be able to kill Ozma?" Groger's smile grew as he then revealed a dagger that seemed to have an ominous aura surrounding it. This is the Sword of Destruction, but it was remade into a deadly dagger as a counter to the sacred relics, known as Relic Breaker. It also destroys a person's curses or blessings received from the brother gods, so say you stabbed Ruby Rose with it, then she would lose her silver eye power or… If Ozma were to be stabbed by the Relic Breaker, would that mean he would lose his reincarnation and his powers? Exactly. However, we have yet to attack Ozma. The man will be keeping himself hidden in his tower, but we will have a chance to attack him when his guard is down. The Vital Festival. Correct, Little Rabbit. Now, let's prepare for the release of the other titans. My sources tell me that Wrath is within Mountain Glen after his battle with the Old Crow and Raven, Groger said as the duo headed to their table to prepare for the next phase of their plan. Alice was even more excited and ready to kill the man who took away her mother and sisters. Within the shadowy depths of the Grimlands, Groger, the Satyr Faunus and Master Sorcerer, brooded over the recent developments. The loss of Changeling, who had been purified and killed by Ozma, was a significant setback. Despite this, Groger's mind was a maelstrom of plans and schemes, always a step ahead in the intricate game of power and survival. Now that we've lost Changeling, I must admit that I am very impressed by Ozma's latest pawn, Groger mused aloud, his voice echoing in the cavernous hall. He appears to be much smarter than that drunk crow, the cowardly raven, and even that depressed fool Taeyang. He smiled a wicked grin that revealed his sharp teeth as he looked over the chessboard in front of him. The pieces represented the various players in this ongoing conflict, with Ozma's forces arranged meticulously on one side and his dark army on the other. Watts, his sole bishop, stood nearby. The man was a paragon of intelligence and strategy, a former scientist turned master of dark arts. Watts had proven invaluable in Groger's schemes, particularly in his ability to create powerful Grimm genetically. His latest creation, the Hound, had become a formidable force due to the unique abilities gifted to it. Watts, Groger called, his voice a low rumble. Your creations have served us well. The Hound, in particular, has exceeded expectations. But with Changeling gone, we must redouble our efforts. Watts stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with a mix of pride and dark curiosity. Indeed, Groger. The Hound's tracking and combat capabilities are unparalleled, but we must continue to innovate. There are many more possibilities to explore within the realm of genetic manipulation and dark magic. Groger nodded, his gaze shifting to a map of Remnant sprawled across the table. Our primary objective remains the same. To free Salem from her imprisonment, but to do so, we need the relics of the gods, which are locked away in the 4 schools. That is why we must locate the other 6 titans as soon as possible, so we can have them assist us in not only freeing Salem, but destroying Ozma once and for all. Groger said before looking at Mountain Glen. How goes the operation in Mountain Glen? Have Cinder and Hazel reported on our progress with the abandoned train tracks? Groger asked before Watts replied. The operation is going according to schedule, and the faunus from the White Fang makes for excellent manual labor. Their leader has others work through the nighttime, while Cinder and Hazel keep any Grimm off their backs. Watts explained while being pleased with the results of the trial test that Groger had set for the White Fang, since he had doubts that they would be useful for anything other than manual labor and possible test subjects for his experiments with the Grimm pools outside the castle. Excellent. I still have my doubts about this White Fang, but if they continue to give us excellent performance results, then I won't complain. Groger said before asking about Tyrion and Marcus. And how are our assassin duo and your latest creation, Hound? Have they been causing some chaos? Indeed they have, Watt said before explaining their actions. They've been making sure to avoid the spider territories and keep a low profile, but thanks to the chaos crystal you gave them, they have been enjoying themselves in the other kingdoms, sowing discord among the people, and even killed a couple of people with Hound to test his capabilities. And they've been wonderful. Excellent. Your little dog would be an excellent hunter, especially since we used the soul of that annoying silver-eyed annoyance as the catalyst for creating Hound. However, I fear that if the girl learns to harness her powers, then it'll be a problem, which is why Ruby Rose must deal with it as soon as possible, or at the very least, remove the problem itself. Groger said before Watt saw a smile grow on his master's face. And fortunately, I have located the one who can help deal with Ruby Rose and her little powers before she learns how to master them, Groger said before looking at Watts. I will be retrieving the next Titan Grimm. Well, I have another special assignment for you, Groger said to Watts before generating his magic through his horns to create an image that terrified Watts, until Alice appeared behind Watts and was excited to see a new Titan Grimm that her mother made back in the day. The next one is the Titan known as Wrath, but he was also known as Centra, Groger said before the image appeared. Alice squealed in excitement, while Watts was amazed but terrified of the Grimm. This monstrous Grimm stood at an imposing height, towering over most Grimm, with a muscular and imposing upper body that resembled that of a heavily armored demonic human. Its lower half is that of a powerful jet-black horse with cloven hooves that crack the ground with every step. His head was a terrifying fusion of a centaur and demonic features, along with a horse-like muzzle filled with razor-sharp teeth. Glowing red eyes that burn with the intensity of pure hatred, as well as 2 large curved horns protruding from its forehead, crackling with red and black energy. The upper body is humanoid but heavily muscled and covered in dark chitinous armor plating. His skin is an inky black, with red veins pulsing just beneath the surface, giving it a fiery appearance. Spikes and jagged protrusions line its back and shoulders, adding to its menacing look. Its arms are incredibly powerful, ending in large clawed hands capable of crushing stone and metal. Red fiery runes glow along its forearms, channeling its wrathful energy into devastating attacks. The horse-like lower body is equally fearsome, with thick muscular legs built for both speed and strength. Its hooves leave smoldering fiery tracks as it moves, and it can rear up to deliver devastating kicks. A long, spiked tail lashes behind it, acting as both a balance aid and a weapon. Broger could tell they were amazed by the Titan's form and began to speak the story behind the Grimm. Long ago, in the ancient times of Remnant, when magic filled the land after the cowardly brother gods fled the world, but before the rise of the Four Kingdoms and the establishment of huntsmen, there existed a dark and terrifying Grimm, known as the Wrathful Centrak. This creature was said to be one of Salem's most powerful and feared creations, crafted from the pure essence of wrath and destruction. Salem, the Witch of Grimm, forged Centrak in her darkest moments, using her immense powers to mold the very embodiment of her rage and the sin of wrath. She combined the strength and ferocity of a centaur with the evil energy of demonic forces, creating a Grimm of unparalleled might and cruelty. The Wrathful Centrak was not just a beast, it was a weapon designed to bring the world to its knees. Broger said while Alice was eating some more popcorn, Watts was fascinated by the power of the Great Grimm before Groger continued the history lesson. Centrak was unleashed upon the world during a time of great strife. Kingdoms were still forming, and humanity was struggling to survive in a world filled with darkness. Centrak, with its immense power and destructive capabilities, wreaked havoc across the land. Entire villages were obliterated and countless lives were lost to its fiery wrath. Broger said while Alice cheered at the villages and people dying, while Watts pondered who raised the child and influenced her strange behavior. Legends tell of a time when the Wrathful Centrak laid siege to a grand city, its inhabitants fighting valiantly, but ultimately falling before the Grimm's relentless onslaught. The city was left in ruins, a testament to the Centrak's devastating power and the futility of resistance against it. Centrak's reign of terror continued until Salem's ambitions brought her into direct conflict with the god's champion, Ozma. As the god's champion punished Salem, sealing her away for her transgressions and casting her into an eternal cycle of life and death, her control over the Grimm wavered. Unfortunately, without her direct influence, Centrak rampaged trying to find a way to free Salem. Broger said while Alice booed the scene with Ozma sealing Salem away and cheered for Centrak to kill Ozma's followers. Desperate to protect what remained of humanity, a coalition of Ozma and his warriors, wielding powerful relics and magic, confronted the Centrak. After a fierce and bloody battle, they managed to subdue the beast, but killing it proved impossible. Instead, they used their combined powers to petrify the Grimm, turning it into a massive obsidian statue. Broger said while the scene changed to Centrak roaring as he turned to stone. The legend of Centrak has been passed down through generations, becoming a cautionary tale and a symbol of the horrors that once plagued the world. The petrified form of the Centrak still stands in a forgotten overgrown valley, a grim reminder of the past. Many believe that it serves as a guardian over a dark and ancient secret, the remains of a once thriving civilization now lost to time. That is until now, since I have located Centrak in the Obsidian Valley within the shattered highlands of the Kingdom of Mistral. Broger explained that Watts was surprised by the location, since he had heard of that location before in the stories. The Obsidian Valley in the Shattered Highlands was a remote and treacherous mountain range in Mistral's northern reaches. The highlands were known for their rugged terrain, cliffs, and dense forests, making the area difficult to access and largely unexplored. They are situated far from the main settlements of Mistral, such as the capital city of Kuroiuri and the coastal town of Higanbana. The region was sparsely populated, with only a few small villages and isolated communities, which Grimm frequently threatened. Fortunately, there was a path to the Obsidian Valley. Still, it was fraught with danger, requiring traversal through dense forests and narrow mountain passes, due to the area being the home to numerous Grimm, deterring most from attempting to reach the valley. As for its history, the Shattered Highlands are believed to be the site of the final battle, where the coalition of ancient warriors confronted and petrified the Wrathful Centrak. Ruins of ancient fortifications and battlements are scattered throughout the valley, now overgrown and reclaimed by nature. Legends also suggest that a once thriving city or civilization existed in the Obsidian Valley, now lost to history. The petrified Centrak serves as both a monument to their struggle and a grim reminder of their downfall. However, nowadays, only some venture into the Obsidian Valley, and those who do rarely return. The dangers of the terrain and the presence of aggressive Grimm discourage exploration. Scholars, treasure hunters, and some huntsmen and huntresses occasionally seek the valley, driven by tales of hidden relics and ancient secrets, but they are often met with peril. Annoyingly, some huntsmen and huntresses are aware of the legend and keep a watchful eye on the region, ensuring that the statue remains undisturbed and that the prophecy of the Centrak's awakening does not come to pass. Don't worry, Dad. I can easily get in and restore Centrak with no problem. Grimm loves me, just like Orsa. Alice said with a smile before Groger chuckled at the girl's enthusiasm. I admire your dedication towards our faction, but I shall be joining you while Watts works on the extra project I want him to do while we're gone, Groger said before shooing her to the front of the castle to give them some time alone until Groger speaks to Watts. As you know, Changeling was killed by Ozma, but the fool thinks she is gone like other Grimm. However, after I went to her corpse, I found what I was looking for within her body, Groger said, producing 2 items from a magic circle. A heart that seemed to be half dark and light, along with a familiar horn that was tainted with Grimm blood. These are? Yes. Your project is to recreate Changeling by using the Grimm pools. Creating Grimm is one thing, but restoring a Titan Grimm will be another project for a genius such as yourself, for it's obvious that the White Grimm purified Changeling. Still, it is possible to corrupt her and recreate her by using the pools to remind her of how humans and Franus treated her, as well as Ozma's words. Can I trust you to do this? Groger asked while Watts looked at the 2 items before him until he looked back up and smiled at his master. Of course, Groger. What are partners for? Plus, the idea of not only restoring a Grimm, but also making them stronger. How can I say no to such a challenge? Watt said before Groger smiled in response. Excellent. I will leave you to it then. Groger said, leaving Watts, who was excited to create a new and improved version of Changeling, which is why when he went back to his lab, he turned on the lights to reveal many brightly colored souls locked in cages, before Watts laughed at them as his rings appeared on his hands. In contrast, many doll-like beings began to awaken. Wake up, my assistants. It's time to begin a new project. Watt said with an excited glare in his eyes while the smile grew so wide it would have split him in 2, for Watts is the genius of Atlas and the Corpse Collector when he awakened his sacred relic. The Rings of Death. Meanwhile, with Groger and Alice. So Centra is capable of absorbing semblances. I thought that was Changeling's thing. Alice said before Groger explained the reason. Changeling could absorb semblances, but only she consumed them. However, Changeling had a limit of how many semblances she could consume, since the other half of the souls would often rebel and harm her body, which is why she is more susceptible to absorb one's stamina and strength, rather than their semblances, unlike Centra, who is capable of absorbing and using the semblances to make himself stronger. He converts the semblances into power that he makes into physical strength, durability, and stamina, making him a formidable tank against his enemies. And you want to use him to deal with Ruby to not only weaken her eyes, but also to take her semblance. Correct? Centra was a deadly opponent to Silver-Eyed Warriors since Summer Rose, the second to last of the Silver-Eyed Warriors, was petrified of Centra when another Silver-Eyed Warrior lost her powers and almost her life. Groger explained, which made Alice look at the satyr in awe before the path to the Obsidian Valley appeared as they walked through Kuroyuri. Such a shame that a beautiful village such as this was destroyed by the war, and many innocent people suffered, all because of Ozma refusing to give the White Grimm a chance when they offered a way for peace, Groger said, walking through the village square while riding on her Grimm's back and whistling at the destruction around them. Was this Centrac's work alone? No. Centrac was sealed in his prison before the destruction of Kuroyuri. This was the work of a Titan Grimm. A Nevermore that became so powerful it single-handedly destroyed this village. Such a shame since this was a wonderful vacation spot for me that allowed me to escape the chaos. Groger said with a hint of sadness before the sound of hooves echoed through the streets, which made Alice and Orsa ready for a fight. Groger merely rolled his eyes at the attempt to be threatening. Reveal yourself, Nevermore. I am Groger, and I will pass this village to get to Centra. Groger shouted before a hiss was heard to reveal a massive horse-like Grimm emerge with a small imp-like Grimm on top of the horse, and its long arms were dragging in the ground, while his head twitched with multiple arrows and swords in his back. The Nevermore tilted his head up and looked at Groger before howling at him to be threatening until a few humans appeared. Hold it right there, worshippers of the darkness. Don't even move. A man wielding a massive rounded steel shield on his back while he held a short-handed battle axe in his left hand. Groger, Alice, and Nevermore looked to see that there was a warrior who seemed to specialize in fighting with a spear, a man who was dressed as a mage and wielded a staff with the symbol of a certain dragon, and a thief who seemed to be holding a bow steadily. It seems that I was right in coming here, since it appears that the Nevermore has come out of hiding, while 2 worshippers of the witch and darkness are here. An old man wielding a spear made from the tusk of a white Grimm he and his comrades had slain. I am Parpatra Ogrian, leader of the White Dragons. Parpatra said while Groger looked at them with Alice, showing some fear before hiding under Orsa's paws. Nevermore looked around before the leader spoke to them. Now, I must kindly ask you to either leave or die by our hands. The air was then silent, and no one uttered a word until Groger broke it by chuckling as if he had been told a funny joke, before turning to see Parpatra in the eyes. Oh, I'm afraid you're mistaken, human, for you and your little comrades are about to die, Groger said as his eyes glowed with power before blasting Parpatra into a busted tea shop with magic until the thief fired his arrow. It struck the Nevermore, making him howl before glaring at the man. Alice. Find a place to hide. Groger said, with Orsa taking her away from the fight before the others began to launch an assault. The axe warrior was charging at Groger, while the spear user dealt with the Nevermore. Groger, his eyes blazing with dark magic, raised his hand and summoned a barrier to deflect the axe warrior's attack. The clash of weapons and the roar of the Nevermore filled the air as the battle began. The battle erupted with a fury, and Groger stood firm, his presence commanding and terrifying. The axe warrior's blow deflected off the magical barrier with a resounding clang, and Groger retaliated with a swift counterattack. With a flick of his wrist, he sent a surge of dark energy that slammed into the warrior, sending him sprawling across the ground. "Fools," Groger sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You dare challenge me?" The spear user lunged at the Nevermore, his weapon aimed with deadly precision. The massive Grim reared back. Its horse neighed loudly as its hooves reared up and began to repel the spearman furiously. The spear user barely managed to parry, the force of the hooves pushing him back. The mage chanted incantations, his staff glowing with a brilliant light as he cast spells to aid his comrades. Bolts of energy shot toward Groger, but the satyr deftly evaded them with little and no trouble, his agility surprising for his size. "If that is all you're capable of," Groger said before his eyes glinted with malice as he raised his left hand high into the air. "Witness the true power of darkness." Groger bellowed. The torrent of dark energy erupted from the ground, ensnaring the axe warrior, mage, and thief in tendrils of shadow. They struggled, but the darkness held them fast. Meanwhile, Alice and Orsa took advantage of the chaos. "We need to find Centra," Alice whispered to her grim companion. Orsa growled in agreement, and they slipped away from the fray, moving stealthily through the village ruins toward the entrance to the path where the statue of the Titan Grim lay dormant. Groger continued to dominate the battlefield, his skills as a warrior and sorcerer overwhelming his opponents. With a swift motion, he conjured a sword of pure darkness and clashed with the axe warrior, their weapons sparking as they collided. The thief managed to free an arm and fired a dust fire arrow, but Groger caught it mid-air and snapped it in half with ease. "You are all outmatched," Groger taunted, his voice echoing with dark power. He unleashed a wave of dark fire, engulfing the thief and mage in flames. They cried out in pain, their bodies writhing as the fire consumed them until the fire ended with the duo collapsing while struggling to stand from the weak flames Groger used on them. Parpatra, having recovered from the earlier blast, emerged from the wreckage of the tea shop, his eyes blazing with determination after seeing his comrade's condition. "I won't let you desecrate this place or my men any further," he shouted, charging at Groger with his spear. Groger met his charge head-on, their weapons clashing with a thunderous impact. "Your resistance is futile," Groger growled, pushing Parpatra back with sheer strength. As the battle raged on, Alice and Orsa navigated the crumbling village, their eyes scanning for any sign of Centra's prison. They moved quickly but cautiously, aware that they were on borrowed time. The distant sounds of the fight urged them forward, thinking that Groger wouldn't be able to hold off the white dragons indefinitely. "There." Alice pointed, her eyes catching sight of a hidden entrance partially obscured by rubble. Orsa growled in acknowledgement, and they hurried towards it. The entrance led to the valleys, the air thick with an ominous presence. Alice's heart pounded as they descended into the darkness. "We have to be careful," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Centra is no ordinary Grim." Orsa's eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, guiding them deeper into the chamber. They moved silently, every step bringing them closer to their goal. Back in the village, Groger and Parpatra continued their fierce duel. Groger's mastery of both sorcery and physical combat made him a formidable adversary, but Parpatra's determination and skill were not to be underestimated. The clash of their weapons sent shockwaves through the village ruins, the intensity of their fight growing with each passing moment. "You can't win, Grim," Parpatra shouted, his voice filled with defiance. "We will protect this land and its people from your darkness." Groger's eyes narrowed, his expression one of cold fury. "We shall see, for I will not be denied." Groger roared, unleashing a devastating spell that shattered the ground beneath Parpatra's feet, causing him to fall into the earth. Parpatra's eyes then glowed with a fierce resolve as he activated his semblance burst. In an instant, he moved with lightning speed, his form becoming a blur as he leaped out of the hole and closed the distance between himself and Groger. His spear struck out like a viper, aiming for Groger's heart. Groger, however, was ready. With a swift motion, he conjured a barrier of dark energy that absorbed the impact of Parpatra's attack. The force of the strike caused the barrier to crack, but it held firm. Parpatra's rapid movements continued, his spear darting in and out, but Groger's defenses were impeccable. Each blow was either deflected or absorbed, leaving Parpatra growing increasingly frustrated and fatigued. "You think your speed can best me?" Groger taunted, his eyes glowing with malevolent power. "You are nothing compared to the powers I command." Parpatra's breath came in ragged gasps as the toll of his semblance began to show. His movements grew slower, and his attacks could have been more precise. Groger seized the opportunity, launching a counterattack with a blast of fire magic that sent Parpatra sprawling to the ground. Meanwhile, the battle with the Nevermore raged on. The thief, having freed himself from the tendrils of shadow, knocked another arrow and fired at the massive Nevermore Grim to give them an advantage. His eyes then became a targeted system as he activated his semblance. True Shot, which allows any projectile to hit its mark with ease and won't be stopped until it hits its target. However, it can only be used 4 times a day due to the strain it can put on his eye. Fire. The thief shouted as he fired his 4 arrows, which were enhanced by fire and ice dust. The arrows found their mark, embedding themselves in the creature's upper body. The Nevermore screeched in pain, as did the horse, its movements becoming more erratic. The Axe Warrior, seizing the opportunity, charged at the Grim with a battle cry, his weapon cleaving into the horse's head. The mage cast a spell of gravity dust, restraining the Nevermore's arms and allowing the spear user to land a decisive blow. With a final ear-splitting shriek, the Nevermore collapsed, its body dissipating into dark smoke. "We did it." The axe and spear warrior shouted triumphantly, turning to face Groger. The mage and the thief joined them, their eyes fixed on the satyr who now stood alone against them. Groger's expression remained unfazed, a cruel smile playing on his dot. "Impressive," he admitted, "but your victory is short-lived." Parpatra struggled to his feet, his determination unwavering despite his exhaustion. "We will not let you pass," he declared, his voice steady. Groger's eyes narrowed. "You are out of your league," he said coldly, raising his left hand before he sent a surge of dark energy that burst forth aimed at the group. The mage quickly raised a protective barrier using earth dust to create the barrier, but the force of Groger's attack shattered it instantly, sending all 5 warriors sprawling. Groger advanced, his presence looming and menacing. Back in the valley, laid the statue of Centra, which made Alice look at the statue in awe and a bit of fear since she was strong, but she mostly relied on her Grim to fight her enemies to weaken them before killing them. In fact, the only real fight she had was with Ruby. She was lucky to take her off guard as well at the right time, thanks to her semblance. Alice then placed a hand on the statue before bringing out a vial of the Grim pools and pouring it on the ground, which began to form a circle around the statue. Afterward, in a solemn and powerful tone, Alice raised her hands towards the towering form of Centra, his petrified body looming over her like a silent sentinel of wrath and destruction. The air around her seemed to thicken with ancient magic as she began to chant, her voice carrying the weight of ages. "From stone to flesh, from darkness deep. Awaken now from timeless sleep. Break free, O Centra, ancient and bold. Let your fury and might unfold. Thy Salem's will and darkest art. I call to you, from realm apart. Rise again, with a vengeance true. Your power unleashed, your purpose anew. Shatter the chains of ancient lore. Embrace the world like never before. Centra, arise and be unbound. In this hour, let your wrath resound." As Alice spoke the final words, a surge of energy pulsed through Centra's petrified form. The obsidian statue cracked and crumbled, revealing the monstrous Grim within. Centra's glowing eyes blazed with renewed vigor as he emerged, free from his ancient prison, ready to wreak havoc upon the world once more. "Centra," she whispered as the seal shattered completely, revealing the monstrous figure of the ancient Grim. Centra emerged from the shattered statue prison he was in, his massive form towering over Alice and Orsa. His red eyes glowed with a menacing light, but he did not attack. Instead, he remained silent, his gaze fixed on Alice. "You are free now, Centra," Alice said, her voice steady despite the immense presence before her. "Groger needs your help. We are in the middle of a battle, and your power is needed." Centra's eyes flickered with understanding. With a nod, the ancient Grim turned and made his way out of the valley, his heavy footsteps shaking the ground. Alice steadied her hand while an excited grin grew on her face, hoping to see Centra in battle once he faced Ruby Rose. Back on the battlefield, Groger sensed the awakening of Centra. A smile spread across his face as he felt the powerful presence drawing nearer. The 4 warriors, battered and exhausted, readied themselves for another assault, but their resolve wavered when they saw Centra approaching. "Behold, your doom," Groger announced, his voice echoing with triumph. Centra stepped into the village square, his presence overwhelming. The humans could feel the immense power radiating from him. With a cold, predatory smile, Groger raised his arms, and tendrils of dark energy shot out, latching onto the warriors. The thief tried to fire another arrow, but it was too late. Groger's tendrils began to drain their stamina and aura. Centra smiled as his horns charged up before he opened his mouth to absorb their essence and souls, which was successful as the mage, thief, spear, and axe warrior yelled while Parpatra, watching in horror, struggled to his feet. He was the last one standing. His comrades had already fallen. He clutched his spear tightly, knowing he was no match for the creature before him, but determined to fight to the end. Centra turned his attention to Parpatra, his smile widening. "You have courage, human," he rumbled. "But it will not save you." Parpatra's eyes blazed with defiance. "I will not let you harm anyone else," he vowed, raising his spear. Broger watched with satisfaction as Centra advanced on Parpatra. The ancient Grim moved with terrifying speed, closing the distance in a heartbeat. Parpatra lunged, but Centra easily deflected the attack, swatting the spear aside with his left hand. With a single motion, Groger's tendrils wrapped around Parpatra, lifting him off the ground. Parpatra struggled, but his strength was rapidly fading. Any last words, human? Centra taunted, his voice a deep mocking growl. Parpatra's eyes met Groger's. "We will stop you," he said, his voice weak but filled with resolve. "One way or another." Centra tightened his grip and Parpatra's body went limp, his essence completely drained. The last of the warriors fell, leaving Groger and Centra alone in the devastated village square. Groger approached Centra, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "Well done, Centra. Now that you are here, our enemies will not stand a chance against us." Centra nodded, his red eyes still glowing with power. "As you command, Groger," he said, his voice echoing with dark promise. "Though I must ask, what has happened while I was sealed away in my prison?" "Ah, now for that, it'll be a long conversation," Groger said before walking towards the rundown tea shop, using some magic to clean it up and preparing a pot of tea to boil with his favorite tea leaves. "Come, have some tea while we chat. I'll also provide some food for us while we enjoy ourselves," Groger said, wanting Centra to know that he had no ill intentions, which the centaur was fine with since he recalled how Salem was working with the satyr when he was still alive. Together, they began to enter the tea shop, with Alice and Orsa emerging from their hiding place, joining Groger and Centra as they moved toward their ultimate goal. To build a new world where Salem, Groger and the Titans are the rulers of their world. Issei and Emerald were walking towards Junior's bar for some much needed relaxation, since the past semester had been annoying, since their assignments kept them busy. Still, the drama at their school was unneeded, since Team RWBY and JNPR seemed to have all kinds of drama happening around them. In Team RWBY, Ruby deals with Yang being protective of her baby sister, even though Ruby has shown she is not some weak or defenseless child who has just learned how to wield a weapon. Yang's insistence on trying to keep Ruby safe has been making the Reaper annoyed and pissed, since it felt like Yang didn't have even the slightest alive of faith in her abilities or her skills as a leader. When Ruby confronted Yang about why she's being so overprotective of her, Yang revealed that she is worried about her baby sister, since it's her job as an older sibling to look out for Ruby and protect her from harm, since Ruby has already lost Summer Rose and couldn't stand losing another member of her family, especially after all of their family had dealt with the loss of Summer Rose. Weiss, Cardina and Blake, on the other hand, were a different story, since Weiss and Henrietta seemed to want to be friends again. However, Blake still didn't trust the whiner heiress, which was understandable given her first impression, but thanks to a chat with Weiss, who was a bit more confident thanks to Henrietta, she was able to tell Blake she could befriend who she wanted and speak to. This led to Blake holding a grudge against Henrietta, thinking she was manipulating Weiss when, in fact, the whiner heiress was helping Weiss be more confident in not just her appearance, but also her fighting style, since Weiss was the weakest in terms of fighting strength, due to her mostly relying on flight and her dust skills to mess with her opponents. Issei had to step in and stop Blake by showing a video of the two heiresses training and how Weiss felt about Henrietta training her, which made Blake surprised but happy that Weiss was improving, which led to Blake joining in on their training sessions. Blake and Henrietta aren't best friends, but they are able to tolerate each other in the same room. Now, Team JNPR's Nora and Ren were fine, since they weren't complicated to figure out, but John and Purra, on the other hand, were a different story, since John still doubted himself at times when he tried to use both Excalibur and his family's sword. Granted, John was able to access Excalibur's other forms better, but the family sword still denied John access to its full power, so for now, John would train with Excalibur. Still, when training with Purra, he felt envious of his partner's skills and how easy she made their training look, which made John want to get stronger, so he trained in secret, but even with that extra training, it still wasn't enough, which made John began to envy his partner. Issei could understand this, but could also tell that John was hurting Purra's feelings, so Issei knocked some sense into the idiot and told him that he had been making his partner worry so much that she felt like she did something wrong, which made John feel like an asshole, so John apologized and explained his reasons why he envied Purra, which earned John a kiss from Purra. Emerald was close with Issei and worked with him since he was named the leader of their group, which made the thief excited, thinking that their team would be easy, since Henrietta and Roan were easy to figure out. Henrietta is an heiress who wants to get away from her old man and become a strong huntress with a little nest egg, but she also wants to restore her friendship with the black sheep of the Schnee family. Roan basically wanted to become a huntress so she could continue her experiments on making explosions. Still, she's also not afraid to get her hands dirty, especially since the girl had a long list of crimes, from setting abandoned buildings on fire, setting off controlled explosions, and also a few experiments with her semblance that may have involved a few explosions. So, do you really think that Roan will want to work with the spiders? Emerald asked before Issei replied. Roan is definitely a wild card, but she can be very helpful in future operations, since Neo said she found something about that crazy cult that wants to bring back the witch. Which is why we're meeting her at Junior's place. Issei said before they ended up at the bar to see that the guards already recognized them, so it was easy for them to get into Junior's place. Issei and Emerald thanked the guards before they went inside the bar to see Junior making a few drinks until he noticed the duo heading his way. Emerald. Issei. I am glad to see you both could make it. I was worried you'd have to pull one on the witch. Junior said before Issei rolled his eyes. My mom isn't a witch. She literally tried to kill me with that writing crop of hers when she found out about you and the boss's relationship, Junior said, which made Issei snicker in his left hand before replying. And I am sorry about that, but now mom is more concerned about me being corrupted again. Will she ever let that go? Have you stopped drinking? Fair point, Junior said before laughing at the joke and patting the boy's head. I'm glad to see you're okay, kid. Neo is in her office, and the twins have missed you. Even their fused form? Issei asked before he yelped when a hand smacked his ass, which was from the fusion form of the Malachite twins. That cake is still as delicious as when we saw it during your performance. Malachite, the fusion of Melanie and Melcia, said before Issei glared at her with annoyance. And I thought I told you never to bring it up again, Issei said since he was still annoyed during his mission as a member of the Spiders that he had to disguise himself as a woman, which was easy since he had a semblance that allowed him to alter his appearance. Which led to Issei donning on a female alter ego that made him popular with a couple of women and men, which made Issei never want to use that semblance again unless it was necessary. Aw, but you didn't mind when we had some Yuri action in the break room, Malachite said, which made Issei quiet. He took a drink Junior handed to him before downing it in one shot. Can we just get back to business, please? Issei said with tinted cheeks, which made Emerald giggle at the memory of when Issei got drunk after a few shots, and boy, was it a night to remember. Okay. Leave the poor kid alone, Malachite. Junior said before Malachite nodded. Then, she whispered something into Issei's left ear that made Issei's face turn apple red before a tail appeared. She seemed excited about what she said until Issei hid away the tail, since it was another semblance he gained when dealing with a snake. Malachite smiled at the reaction before kissing Issei's cheek and leaving him, which made Emerald annoyed before Junior chuckled at the fusion antics since he knew that the Malachite sisters were interested in Issei, especially since they enjoyed teasing him when he watched them dance until Neo tried to shoot them when they got a bit frisky with Issei. Let's go, Emerald said while dragging Issei to the office, which Issei didn't seem to mind. This amused Junior before calling out to them. Make sure you use protection. This made Emerald blush and rush even faster to the office until the duo saw Neo smiling at the two of them before gesturing to the seats in front of her desk, which Emerald gladly accepted before Issei greeted Neo, who was happy to be with her lover again. Neo leaped into his arms and rubbed her head on his, as if trying to mark her scent on him, before the two shared a passionate kiss, which made Emerald blush at how hot it was, before seeing Neo smirk her way as the ice cream-themed girl slithered a hand into Issei's pants, which made him turn on, before Issei began to nibble into her neck, which made Neo moan in joy until she felt her lover's teeth sink into her neck, making her eyes widen in shock and arousal as her tongue flopped out of her mouth until the two stopped to catch their breath. I've missed you, Neo, Issei said, which made Neo smile at him with an excited grin before Emerald smacked herself in the face to shut down her flustered face before speaking to them. Did we get to the reason why you called us here after the first semester? Tomorrow, we're supposed to be going on missions with either our teachers or licensed hunters. Emerald said, which made Neo roll her eyes before she got behind her desk and began to explain the information that she received from her informant. It appears that the Eye of Salem is investigating the whereabouts of the ancient Titan Grim that was similar to Chrysalis that you both fought in the forest during your orientation. Neo explained before showing ancient images of the Titan Grim. Issei was surprised since he did some reading up on them after wanting to learn more about Chrysalis until he learned about the other Titan Grim, who were the 7 generals of Salem's army that served her with absolute loyalty and caused devastation to all they came across until Ozma, the warrior of light, sealed Salem into her prison. Thus also petrifying the Grim Titans due to humanity being too weak to defeat them for good. That makes sense since it would explain how Chrysalis broke free from her petrification. Did your sources locate the other Titans so we can destroy them before they are revived? Issei asked before Neo nodded and continued her presentation. One of our informants, who was working with the White Dragons to locate the Titan Grim of Wrath. Unfortunately, before they could report back to me, the Nevermore that destroyed the village close to Raph's prison alerted them when a strange being came into the village. Neo said as she then tapped on her scroll and displayed the battle with the white dragons facing the Nevermore and a black aura that the camera couldn't make out until a lot of shaking occurred as the Grim of Wrath emerged from its prison. Issei and Emerald were shocked by this as they watched the Titan Grim destroy the white dragons with ease before the video ended with their bodies being incinerated. Neo sighed as she ended the video before turning back to them. That was the Grim of Wrath. And not counting Chrysalis, there are 5 more who are like that, Emerald asked in fear and shock before Neo nodded her head until she explained. Indeed. I put in a request for your team to assist a transportation team that will be picking up food, booze, and dust from Veiled Distribution as security. The place where you'll be picking up the supplies is near here. Neo said as she displayed a map and pointed to an area. One of the Grim has been located at Mountain Glen. Suppose we can destroy Titan Grim while it is in its petrified state. In that case, we will be able to deal with a dangerous foe before the cult resurrects him. Neo said before displaying an image of the massive Titan Grim and a map of Mountain Glen, the place where the beast resides. I've heard of this one, Issei said before taking over the explanation. Worm Avarice, the serpent of covetousness, was a colossal serpent like Titan Grim, embodying the sin of greed. It measured over 100 feet in length, with jagged cold black scales that glimmer with gold-like veins, resembling a treasure hoard embedded within its very flesh. Its eyes are glowing emeralds, emitting an eerie green light, and its mouth is filled with rows of razor-sharp teeth, dripping with corrosive black venom. The remnants of large tattered wings, now petrified stone, extend from its back, symbolizing the ancient power it once wielded. Even in its stone form, Worm Avarice exudes an aura of avarice and menace. How did you know that? Emerald asked in surprise before Issei replied. You don't think I listened to all of Port's speeches about his glory days before becoming a teacher, do you? Issei said, which made Emerald stifle a laugh before continuing with what he had learned about the snake from the history books and grim legends. Worm Avarice was one of Salem's most cunning creations, a grim born from and feeding on the endless desire for more. During the ancient wars between Salem and the forces of Remnant, Worm Avarice was infamous for its ability to corrupt and manipulate, offering those it encountered promises of wealth and power in exchange for their loyalty or their souls. Its greed knew no bounds, often leading it to betray even its kind if it meant amassing more power and riches. But didn't Salem control the beast? Yes, but even the snake would never betray Salem, since she is the one who gave it life and promised the snake to have a place where he could rule as its kingdom. But the snake also cared for Salem, and granted it betrayed some Grim, but it never betrayed Salem. Issei said before continuing. When Ozma sealed away Salem, Worm Avarice was engaged in a devastating battle that later became known as Mountain Glen. As the sealing magic took hold, Worm Avarice was petrified, its massive coiled form sinking into the earth, entwined with the city's foundation. Mountain Glen, once a flourishing settlement, became a lonely and dangerous place, with the petrified Worm Avarice at its core, a grim reminder of the cost of unchecked greed. Emerald was shocked by this before Neo took over the meeting and explained its abilities and current location. Nowadays, the Hunter organization has reported that Worm Avarice lies dormant beneath the ruins of Mountain Glen, its petrified form coiled deep within the earth, entwined with the very foundations of the abandoned city. The area around it is riddled with tunnels and caves, many of which are said to lead directly to the heart of the petrified Grim. Isn't that what Issei just said? Yes, but there's more to the serpent than you think. Neo said before she continued. Local legends speak of strange occurrences in ruins, whispers of wealth hidden deep within the earth, visions of glittering treasures just out of reach. Those who have ventured too close have either never returned or emerged maddened, driven by an insatiable greed that they cannot explain. Neo said as she then showed reports of people who were driven insane and ended up dead in mental hospitals, or law-abiding people who became thieves who were killed on sight due to them protecting their wealth. Should Worm Avarice awaken, it is feared that Mountain Glen will once again become a site of devastation, with the Grim's greed-fueled hunger leading it to consume everything in its path, leaving nothing but desolation in its wake. That's why the petrified form of Worm Avarice stands as a grim reminder of the dangers of greed, waiting for the day it might rise again to claim what it believes is rightfully its own. Neo said, which shocked Emerald until Issei nodded in agreement with her. Also, the serpent's abilities are extremely powerful, even in its petrified form. The whispers are actually part of its silver tongue, since even in its petrified state, Worm Avarice exerts a powerful influence on those who venture too close, filling their minds with visions of wealth and driving them to madness as they seek to claim what does not exist. Correct, and when the snake was awakened, Worm Avarice could unleash its corrosive venom, which not only destroys flesh, but also corrupts the mind, turning its victims into greedy, hollow shells of their former selves. Worm Avarice was also reported that it could create illusions of vast riches and treasures, luring in the greedy and desperate. Those who attempt to claim these treasures find themselves trapped in a nightmarish illusion, forever seeking what they can never have. But that's not all, since its true power comes from its ability to consume souls. Issei said with a shiver of fear, which made Emerald freeze until she looked at Issei and asked. "See, consume souls?" "Yeah. Worm avarice can consume the souls of its victims, absorbing their essence to increase its power. The more souls it devours, the more formidable it becomes, driven by an endless hunger for more," Issei said, with Emerald collapsing and a wisp leaving her mouth as if she saw a nightmare before her very eyes. Whoa. Emerald," Issei said before pulling her up and placing her on the couch while Neo patted his back. "It's fine. She'll recover when she wakes up. I have also been informed that a certain heiress will leave your group." "Yeah. Henrietta will be with Team RWBY on a grim extermination mission located in Atlas, which normally wouldn't be given to first years. Still, thanks to Ruby's reputation and skills, as well as Yang's and Blake's, the team was going with just the 4 of them. Still, since one of the licensed huntresses assigned to the mission got injured on duty, they needed a replacement, so they asked Henrietta to take over, since she used her name to get some extra security for their transportation," Issei said, recalling how Henrietta was excited to go back home for her first mission and spend time with Weiss, who wasn't as thrilled as Henrietta, but the heiress was happy to spend time with her first real friends. Neo nodded before smiling at him. He pulled him by his shirt to her desk, which she was sitting on, and drew circles on his shirt. "You know, since Emerald is out of commission and the meeting is over, why don't we treat ourselves with some dessert, since I know what I want," Neo said before she licked her, which made Issei blush at this, since he knew that Neo was definitely thirsty, given the look in her eyes. How about some chocolate?" "Oh, don't play coy with me, Issei. I know you've wanted to eat my cake since we made it out when you got here," Neo said, since she knew Issei was a boob man, which she had, but Issei was also a huge fan of her delicious ass. That really made Issei explore other types of fun with Neo, which included her love of stockings that Neo loved to tease him with when she played footsie. Issei also wanted to take a bite of his lover's delicious cake since their make-out session. "And Neo, I do want to have some fun with you again, but Emerald is right there. Ignore the thief since she's unconscious." "Why yeah but..." Neo pulled Issei down to her eye level and smirked at him, since she understood his fear and didn't want her to get in trouble with his overprotective mother. "Hush. You are not getting out of this, my lovable dragon. Plus, given your friend, you really want to taste a bite of chocolate-dipped strawberries with a hint of vanilla," Neo said while stroking his sword with her left hand in his pants, which made Issei gulp before Neo got off her desk and pulled Issei by his hand to the back room hidden behind her office that was a lover's den with a king-size bed that dominated the space, adorned with silky sheets in deep shades of red and black. The atmosphere was intimate, with soft lighting casting a warm glow over the room. Neo guided Issei to the bed, her touch both gentle and firm, as she pushed him down onto the plush surface. "Now, my dear dragon," Neo's text appeared in the air with a playful tone, "let's see just how much you've missed me." Issei's heart raced as Neo straddled him, her slender fingers trailing up his after going under his shirt, sending shivers down his spine. Despite the nervousness bubbling within him, there was no denying the excitement that coursed through his veins. Neo leaned in close, her breath warm against his ear as she whispered, "Relax, Issei. I promise this will be fun." With that, she pressed her to his, the kiss deepening quickly as their pent-up desires began to take over. Issei couldn't help but wrap his arms around her, pulling her closer as their bodies melded together. The scent of her perfume, sweet and intoxicating, filled his senses, and any remaining hesitation melted away. Neo's hands wandered under his clothes, exploring his body with a mix of tenderness and urgency, her touch igniting a fire within him. Issei responded in kind, his hands finding their way to her hips, gripping them as he guided her movements, both of them quickly losing themselves in the heat of the moment. As the world outside faded away, the only thing that mattered was the two of them, together in this intimate space, sharing a moment that was as passionate as it was inevitable. Neo and Issei then separated, with Issei being pushed back by her before Neo slowly stood up with her clothes coming off as she swayed her hips in a sexy manner, removed her corset in a sexy manner, before stopping midway to tease Issei, only then removing it fully, revealing a black and pink bra, before using her semblance to remove her pants to reveal black leggings. Showing herself in very revealing lingerie. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow the Nefarious Doctor for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.